Being the child of a powerful political figure yet enduring mistreatment from that same parent was a cruel irony. The only escape seemed to lie in earning money through a game, but after finally completing it, he found himself transported inside its world. Now, he had to choose: remain under the control of the powerful, or align with the monsters and carve out a kingdom of his own. The story opened with the protagonist imagining what it would be like to win 10 billion won. Sitting before his computer, he thought about how such fortune could free him from his current life. Everyone knew him as the son of a well-known congressman, yet that fame came with suffocating pressure. He was constantly expected to uphold his father's reputation and often appeared in the media beside him. At school, a female classmate suddenly wrapped her arms around him, leaving him uneasy. She whispered for them to leave the area for a while. In the background, other students murmured about how envious they were for not being close to her. The girl led him into an alley where a few older boys waited. Together, they cornered him, questioning why he hadn't lent her more money. Startled, Jihan insisted he had already helped her the previous week and couldn't do it again. One of the boys stepped forward, threatening to expose him for running an illegal website. Cornered, Jihan retaliated by saying they were involved as well. The girl smirked and remarked that in that case, they would all have to confess. She knew the truth. If things went public, only Jihan would bear the blame. His father's reputation dragged through the mud. With a cold confidence, she stepped closer, telling him she knew he would figure something out. Later, at home, he slams the door, but he didn't expect it to his father be already waiting. The man approached, his demeanor suggesting he already knew what had happened. His gaze was sharp, his tone commanding as he warned his son not to do anything that could damage his name. Fear tightened Jihan's chest, cold sweat forming on his forehead. When he stayed silent, his father demanded an answer. Trying to stay composed, Jihan forced a smile, claiming he would not disappoint him. His father's response was cutting. There was nothing his son could do that would disappoint him more. The man ordered him to keep following his instructions without question. Frustration overtook the boy as he fled to his room. He couldn't understand why his life had to be this way. Then, a small kitten appeared, brushing against his hand. Startled, he pulled away, but the kitten meowed softly from his desk. For the first time that day, Jihan felt a faint warmth in his chest. At least the little creature seemed to care about him. The kitten leapt into his lap, its tiny paws tickling his legs. Holding it gently, the boy muttered that Ruru was the only one still staying by his side. Just then, a faint sound caught his attention, a game notification flashing across his computer screen. He looked closer and saw that he had already cleared 99 rounds. Only one remained, yet no matter what he did, he could never push through the final stage. Every attempt ended the same, with a game over. Confused, he questioned why success remained out of reach after so many tries. On a live stream, another frustrated player ranted about failing at the same point. Watching silently, Jihan remembered how this game had been released a year ago, yet no one had ever surpassed the 100th wave. Even so, he refused to give up. This was his only shot at escaping the miserable life he was trapped in. His last chance was the heart card of Rizzledrake, but even that failed to carry him through. Nearby, a grocery bag lay open with a few items inside, including a pack of cat treats. Reaching for one, the kitten accidentally stepped on his phone. A red glow filled the screen. The disassembly option had been triggered. Jihan's eyes widened in shock as he realized what had just been taken apart, the heart of Rizzledrake itself. For a moment, he froze, trying to absorb what had happened. Losing that item meant starting all over again. Panic began to creep in, but before despair could take hold, another notification popped up. It mentioned something new, a fragment of the heart. That shouldn't have been possible. Dismantling an item never produced fragments. But if this was real, then maybe he could use it. Acting on instinct, he accepted the fragment and chose to merge it with the dragon's soul. A burst of crimson light erupted from the screen. In that instant, Jihan realized this was the missing piece, the true path to completing the game. The system restarted with the new item active. The next morning, he followed his routine and went to school, though he couldn't resist sneaking the game open behind a book. When he returned home, he continued playing, even walking through the streets with his eyes on the screen. It didn't take long for him to reach the 99th stage again. With the heart fragment in hand, victory was finally within reach. Focused and determined, he began the last level. A female knight appeared on screen, cutting down the oncoming monsters. He tapped the command, hoping this time it would work, and a bolt of lightning crashed down. annihilating every enemy in sight. For the first time, it looked like he would finally win, and he did. Triumph surged through him, and Jihan almost jumped from his chair in excitement. But the moment shattered when the door burst open. His father stood there holding a golf club. Startled, Jihan froze. The look on the man's face promised nothing good. The congressman spoke coldly, saying he'd received a call from classmates who had been blackmailing his son, threatening to expose his illegal activity unless they were paid off. Terrified, Jihan tried to defend himself, stumbling over his words as he apologized. But the deputy was already poised to strike, the golf club raised high. His eyes burned with malice, and the boy could only scream in fear. Tears streamed down Jihan's face as he trembled helplessly. Without hesitation, his father brought the club down, shattering the phone into pieces. The sound of destruction echoed like the end of a nightmare. When it was over, Jihan slowly pushed himself up, voice trembling as he asked about his cat, Ruru. The response he received was cold, that he wouldn't be needing the animal anymore. That single statement ignited something inside him. His anger surged, fists clenched as he glared at the man who called himself his father. The deputy sneered, demanding to know why the boy wore that expression. Sweat trickled down Jihan's face as he demanded to know where his cat was. The man's tone remained devoid of emotion as he explained that the cat was now with Jihan's mother, a woman long gone. The words hit like a knife to the chest. Shock left the boy speechless, his body stiff with disbelief. The deputy grabbed his head, forcing him to look up, and said he only needed to obey orders from now on. Finally, the man uttered a warning, not to disappoint him again. He added that he had once believed the boy capable of great things. Then, silence. Jihan lay on the floor, his broken phone beside him. A faint sound buzzed from it, the game's voice declaring that the mission was complete. But now none of it mattered. Jihan stared blankly, feeling that life itself had lost all meaning. The voice from the device continued, speaking again, this time inviting him to another world. Before he could react, lightning ripped through the sky, flashing inside his room. The light swallowed him whole. When the brightness faded, Jihan stood in the grand hall of a castle, the heart of the game's kingdom. People surrounded him, their eyes wide with awe. They called him the legendary knight, chanting that he would be the savior of their realm. Disoriented, he tried to make sense of it all. His tears wouldn't come. It felt as though every emotion had been wiped away. Before him stood a man with a long beard, the king. The ruler studied him and asked if he truly was the legendary knight. Then recognition hit. Jihan remembered that face, those words. They were identical to the game's dialogue. The man introduced himself as King Bayless Jordia III and explained that their kingdom was under siege by monsters. Before the king could continue, a servant burst in with urgent news about the invasion. Jihan remained silent, taking in every detail. The setting, the people, the dialogue, all exactly as he remembered from the game. Once the commotion settled, the king spoke again, declaring that the situation was dire and commanding Jihan to act. He urged the young man to assume command of the knights and defend the kingdom. Jihan rose to his feet, his voice steady but heavy. He told everyone to listen closely. His mind still reeled from the loss of Ruru, and as he thought of her, he admitted that even 1,000,000,001 no longer meant anything. The knights whispered among themselves, confused, calling him weak for a supposed hero. The king silenced them and promised that if Jihan fulfilled his duty, he would be granted whatever his heart desired. That promise caught Jihan's attention. He asked if the king truly meant anything he desired. The bearded ruler assured him there was no need to worry. He simply had to obey his commands. Those words struck a nerve. They reminded Jihan of Dan Gai, his father, a man who had forced obedience under the pretense of maintaining reputation. Now the king was repeating that same pattern. The realization burned through him, and he refused outright, shouting that he wouldn't do any of it. The king's expression darkened, his confidence faltering. In front of everyone gathered, Jihan spoke of the life he'd endured. He had always been surrounded by people who cared only for themselves. Every single one, including his father, had used him for their own gain. And now, the same thing was happening again. The king didn't want a hero. He wanted another obedient pawn. Jihan made it clear he would never be that again. The king stayed silent, though his displeasure was obvious. Cursing them all under his breath, Jihan pressed the option to reject the offer. The king's servant stood frozen, unable to believe what had just happened. Then, The screen in front of Jihan began to glow red. In the game's storyline, this color usually meant failure, the point where the monsters invaded the kingdom and the player failed the mission. But something was different this time. A new prompt appeared, offering another choice. The monster faction had been unlocked. Jihan stared at it in silence, the meaning sinking in. Was he being chosen to lead the monsters instead of fighting them? The king's voice broke through the tension, booming across the hall. He declared that every choice came with consequence. Addressing the court, he stripped Jihan of his title, announcing that he was no longer the legendary knight. His shouting grew harsher, declaring Jihan an enemy of the kingdom, a threat to them all. As the words echoed, Jihan remained motionless, weighing the reality before him. But time was short. The king's command for his execution had already been given. Even surrounded by drawn swords, Jihan stayed calm. Blades glimmered inches from his throat, yet he stood unfazed, certain that there was still a way out. Then it happened. A surge of crimson light burst from his body, filling the room with raw energy. The king's fury turned into confusion as the radiance intensified. Jihan's selection had been completed. The system granted him new, overwhelming powers, strength that surpassed human limits. From that moment on, his purpose shifted completely. His goal was no longer to save humanity, but to erase it. He would side with the monsters and burn the kingdom to the ground. The system's voice echoed once more, promising that if he succeeded in this mission, he would earn a rare artifact, one that could return him to his original world. That thought stirred a distant memory, the day his mother had brought him the tiny kitten, Ruru. He wondered if finishing this path could bring him back to that peaceful time. Pulled back to the present, he noticed the soldiers murmuring in fear, commenting on the strange, overwhelming energy radiating from him. The king was certain he'd glimpsed a monster's silhouette, a beast unlike anything he'd seen before. Jihan scanned his new reality, realizing this twist wasn't in the original game. Soon the main objective appeared: break the defenses and wipe out the humans. Despite the change, Jihan noticed his progress still tracked like the game. Following the usual sequence should spawn a random summoning ticket. Instead, an egg materialized. The system labeled it a random egg, and Jihan chose to hatch it. Another explosion rocked the hall as the shell burst and wings cut through the dust. Soldiers froze, sensing a summon had occurred. When the form finally emerged, Jihan was stunned. He had summoned Rezoldrak, but the creature that stepped out was only a baby dragon. Level 1, tiny and absurdly cute, even nudging his hand with its tongue. The sight of it pulled his mind back to his kitten, and a new power unlocked for him: the Eye of the Supreme. This ability revealed stats for monsters and items. Seeing the little dragon calmed the knights, and they took the moment as the signal to attack. Jihan, unsure if any of this was real, didn't care. He used the eye to read Rezoldrak's skills, and found it could unleash dragon breath. He ordered the small beast to use that power just as the soldiers moved in. For a heartbeat, he feared time had run out. What began as a tiny fireball swelled into a cataclysmic blast that wiped out everyone in its path. The blast tore through the palace wall, sending rubble raining down into the village. Standing before the ragged hole, Jihan felt a raw awe at the dragon's strength. The onlookers couldn't believe a single strike had done so much. They stared, trying to name what Jihan had summoned. Thrilled and grim, Jihan admitted it surpassed everything he had expected. If events continued, he'd eventually earn one of the knight's relics. He wasn't in any rush to go back to his ruined life. He would pour himself into this mission. Drawing the king's gaze, he fixed his stare on the man and declared his intent. He would bring about humanity's destruction, driven to claim the final prize. Amid the palace chaos, others nearby whispered, wondering what on earth had just happened. Nearby, a knight sprinted with everything he had, believing he could end the fight right there. Jihan commanded the dragon to fire again. The king's servant immediately shouted for the guards to protect their ruler, and the armored soldiers rushed to form a wall of steel in front of him. Jihan raised his hand, marking the target, while the small dragon began gathering power. His intention was clear: to wipe the king out completely. Meanwhile, the approaching knight closed the distance, while the others held their shield formation tight. Jihan waited patiently for his companion to finish charging its fire. Just as the energy was about to be released, the knight reached his king's side. Relief swept through the royal guards. There was no explosion, no devastation, only silence. The knight grinned, convinced the king was safe, but Jihan quickly realized something had gone wrong. The dragon's attack hadn't worked. Its breath hadn't built enough mana, and instead of a deadly blast, only a weak puff of fire came out, barely enough to scorch the ground, leaving behind a small cloud of smoke. Seeing this, Jihan decided the best move was to wait for the cooldown to end. But as night fell, a new threat stepped forward. He studied the man approaching, one of the elite knights, ranked S among the Zodiac Order, a towering, muscular warrior known as Ares. The remaining soldiers confirmed that the king was unharmed. That realization hit Jihan hard. The situation was turning against him. From afar, the king gave a cold command: eliminate the enemy at once. Ares raised his staff, power radiating from it. Jihan braced himself beside his dragon, weighing his next move. He knew this knight's strength. It was nothing to take lightly. Without hesitation, Ares unleashed his skill, summoning a blazing wall of fire that roared toward Jihan. He understood instantly that escape was nearly impossible. The explosion ripped through the palace, tearing more sections apart. Even friendly knights were caught in the flames. But Jihan had managed to dive aside just in time. He remembered from the game that this attack only traveled in a straight line, easy enough to avoid if you knew what to expect. Watching the destruction, he realized the knight didn't care about his own comrades. Furious, Ares cursed the dodge and promised to burn a hole straight through Jihan's heart next time. Knowing that the attack needed time to recharge, Jihan saw his window of opportunity. He had to flee, but when he lifted his head, Ares was already closing in fast. Jihan's mind raced, searching for any possible move left. He couldn't have come all this way just to end it here. Then, another reward notification appeared. A mysterious chest materialized before him. Without hesitation, he accepted the item, yelling in frustration for it to open faster. Time was running out. As the knight swung his weapon down to strike, the blow landed squarely on the chest instead. A sudden force burst out, repelling him backward. Finally, Jihan caught sight of what the chest contained. A massive sword began to rise from within. Using the Eye of the Supreme, he identified it, a weapon with immense magic power that also boosted his stats. The readout showed it was an S-rank item. Shock mixed with grim realization. It seemed the system truly intended for him to annihilate the human side. The moment the sword touched the ground, the floor cracked beneath it. Jihan stared, disbelief taking over as the entire area began to split apart. The palace floor collapsed, sending debris crashing down as he was flung into open air. Falling from such a height, he thought bitterly that even the royal palace couldn't handle the weight of a divine weapon. The ground rushed closer, the wind roaring past his ears. This could have been his end. But then, his fall suddenly stopped. Something tugged at his clothes. He looked up and saw the small dragon struggling desperately to lift him. The creature flapped its wings with all its strength, keeping him aloft. From below, the people of the kingdom looked on in shock at the sight of someone soaring through the air. Jihan, still catching his breath, wondered why his mission had to begin in enemy territory of all places. At least here, the only one who could pose real danger was Ares. Even so, he knew that stronger knights would appear soon. His first goal had to be escape. Meanwhile, back at the ruined palace, Ares aimed his weapon at his own throat in frustration. He cursed himself for failing to finish the enemy, muttering that Jihan should have been swallowed by the sea by now. Just then, a messenger arrived. The king was calling for him. The knight knelt before his ruler, asking for punishment for allowing the criminal to flee. But the king ordered him to stop, reminding him that dusk was near. Ares froze, realizing what that meant. Nighttime was when the monsters grew stronger. The king then appointed him commander of the walls and sent him to the front lines. High above, Jihan drifted in the sky, recalling the early stages of the game. The same pattern of monster attacks beginning with wild goblins. But with Ares present, he knew those beasts wouldn't make much progress at first. Then he noticed the ground approaching again. The baby dragon's wings trembled. It was losing strength fast. Despite its effort, Rezeldrak couldn't hold him any longer. Both of them plummeted sharply, crashing back toward the kingdom below. The crash sent both of them slamming into a stone pillar, the impact echoing through the ruined area. Despite the collision, Jihan emerged unscathed. Right beside him, a pair of boots lay abandoned. Without hesitation, he slipped them on. Before he could move again, a voice cut through the silence. A young blonde girl stood nearby, staring at him with suspicion. She didn't recognize his face. Her name was Lib, an S-rank knight. She immediately demanded to know who he was. Jihan recognized her instantly. In the game, Lib had been a crucial figure in stopping the 100th wave. Though scatterbrained at times, she excelled at dungeon farming and had grown powerful enough to take down monsters on her own. When she repeated her demand for identification, Jihan addressed her by name. The reaction was immediate. Confusion flickered in her eyes as she asked how he knew her. Jihan replied that he knew her well, having already gauged her worth. The words meant nothing to her, but for him, this was a warning. She was now an enemy, and he would have to deal with her sooner or later. As night descended, chaos spread across the kingdom. Outside the city walls, the Doblins gathered, ready to storm the gates. The soldiers shouted orders, warning that the monsters were already within range. They readied their bows and unleashed volleys of arrows. Some of the creatures began scaling the walls, forcing the defenders to hurl stones down at them. The air filled with screams, clanging metal, and the deep roar of the invasion. One of the knights muttered that they couldn't hold out much longer. Another shouted that Dryce was on his way to reinforce them. Meanwhile, in another corner of the battlefield, Lib's interrogation continued. She warned that if Jihan refused to answer, she would act on her own. Jihan thought about eliminating her immediately, but realized it was impossible for now. He'd have to bluff his way through. He claimed to be an ordinary citizen from District 1, simply trying to assist in the defense. Before Lib could question further, his small dragon appeared beside him. The knight's eyes widened at the sight of the creature, her body tensing. It was, after all, a monster. Sweat formed on Jihan's forehead. Rezeldrak wasn't supposed to show up yet. The girl's suspicious look made it clear she was on edge, and he struggled to think of an excuse. But before he could speak, Lib stepped forward, sword raised defensively. She declared that she would protect him from the beast. The baby dragon tilted its head, letting out a confused, almost innocent expression. Lib's gaze hardened, but the creature didn't react aggressively. Slowly, she realized the little monster wasn't hostile at all. Then, a thunderous explosion erupted nearby, shaking the ground. Lib's attention snapped toward the noise, and Jihan seized the moment. He motioned to his dragon and bolted from the area, vanishing into the chaos of the night. It wasn't the soldiers' fault that their weapons had slipped from control, but by the time Lib turned her gaze back toward where Jihan had been, both he and his creature were already gone. A soldier ran up to her, shouting about the gate. The look on his face made her heart tighten. Whatever was happening there was bad. Loud, pounding strikes echoed from that direction. Inside, the guards waited in tense silence, their fear written across their faces as the gate began to splinter under pressure. Lib arrived just in time, commanding the soldiers to prepare for close combat. Archers drew their bows, aiming at the horde of goblins swarming beyond the wall. Among them stood one far larger than the rest, a giant whose sheer strength was enough to break through at any moment. With a roar, the massive goblin swung its weapon, and the gate burst apart. Lib tightened her grip on her sword, calling her troops to charge. The soldiers braced themselves as the enormous creature led the invasion. But before the monsters could advance any further, flames burst across the battlefield. Riz appeared, his arrival catching even Lib off guard. Seeing the breach, he unleashed his fire skill without hesitation, engulfing the enemy ranks. The goblins screamed as the flames devoured them. Standing tall, Riz smirked at the devastation, remarking that the monsters still had a long way to go. High on a distant ridge, Jihan watched the clash unfold below. His goal now was no longer to protect humanity, but to see it burn. Beside him, his small dragon let out a curious sound, prompting him to rest his hand on its head. The creature's attention suddenly shifted upward. Rain had begun to fall. It looked eager to play in it, but Jihan held it back, not wanting it to cause trouble. Back in the kingdom, the humans celebrated a narrow victory. Lib felt uneasy, knowing she hadn't been the one to turn the tide this time. Far away, in the dark forest, Jihan noticed movement. Someone, or something, was approaching. He recalled that he had spawned far from the city walls, and realized he was now deep in monster territory. That made things complicated. He had no clear path forward. He had replayed the game hundreds of times before, and knew every tactic by heart. But this time was different. He'd have to rebuild from nothing. Then a thought struck him. Turning to his side, he spotted his small companion still nearby. Moments later, Rezeldrak darted off toward the opposite direction. Jihan followed his gaze and froze. On the forest floor, a colony of ants was working tirelessly, dragging pieces of food and dirt. One of them noticed the dragon's presence and froze in fear. Rezeldrak crouched low, watching them closely, fascinated. Pulling his companion aside, Jihan exhaled slowly and began thinking of his next move. Out of nowhere, a new mission prompt appeared before Jihan's eyes. The objective was clear. He had to create a faction of monsters. He paused, trying to figure out how to even start that. If he needed to recruit monsters like goblins, now would be the perfect moment, but there weren't any nearby. He wondered how he would even communicate with them if he found some. That was when something unusual moved in his peripheral vision. By the time he turned, it was already upon him. A sudden strike came fast. Someone was trying to kill him. The blade glinted inches from his neck, and a figure stood right in front of him. His eyes widened in confusion. Claws grazed his skin. When he focused on his attacker, recognition struck. The figure was a young girl, a beastkin, a hybrid between human and animal. Jihan instinctively labeled her as a rabbit, but her reaction showed she didn't appreciate that. She snapped back, insisting she resembled a fox instead, and even tried to justify it. Their argument lingered in the air, her irritation obvious. Remaining calm, Jihan studied her more closely and finally realized she truly did resemble an Arctic fox. The girl leaned closer, sniffing the air. Then she began circling him, her nose brushing against his clothes as she took in his scent. Her tone shifted. She admitted that while he looked human, his scent was undeniably that of a monster. That revelation startled Jihan. Moments later, 2 new notifications appeared. The first granted him the ability to communicate with other beings. The second gave him natural charisma, increasing how positively others perceived him. With that, Jihan understood why he was able to converse with her so easily. Still, the girl didn't seem entirely at ease. Her questions came rapid and suspicious. Who was he really? Jihan felt uneasy, wondering if the attraction skill wasn't working as intended. Then a sudden movement interrupted everything. A rope shot across his face, snapping past him and catching someone nearby. The sound of impact was followed by a cry of pain. 3 men emerged from the shadows, cheering as they realized they'd captured their target. Jihan froze, realizing how far things had spiraled. Judging from their words, he understood that he had been outside the human kingdom for almost a year. The fox girl, snarling, turned toward him with fury. She accused him of being human and of luring her into a trap. Her anger burned through every word as she shouted that she wouldn't fall for it. Wincing in pain, she demanded to know why they never stopped hunting her. Jihan quickly understood. There had been a misunderstanding from the start. The humans began pulling the rope again, and the girl's body lifted off the ground. The arrow lodged in her leg twisted as she was yanked upward. The largest man in the group braced himself, pulling hard on the line, but the girl seized the chance to retaliate, preparing to strike back with all her strength. Jihan stayed back and watched, waiting to see how things would unfold. The fox girl took a hard punch to the face, but the human attacker hadn't counted on a reply. She slammed her other leg into him, the kick landing with enough force to send the big man sprawling. His 2 companions fumed at the sight. Jihan thought the girl was small, but fierce. One of the men stormed over, cursing her for defending herself, and then stamped a boot down on her head to shut her up. Jihan's body remained still as the abuse continued. The fox girl writhed under their blows, and anger began to rise in him. Another hunter moved closer and asked if everything was fine, assuming Jihan was human and warning him about the danger in the area. He questioned why Jihan was alone. The fox kept chattering, but the man didn't understand her tongue. Ready to strike something nearby in punishment, he lifted his hand, but the group leader ordered him to stop, arguing she might die if hit. The short man muttered an apology for losing control, which eased Jihan. He'd feared she might be killed. The leader's mood turned sharp. He accused Jihan of speaking with the girl earlier, then shoved a knife into Jihan's stomach to prove a point. Blood slicked the blade as it clattered to the ground. Jihan clutched his wound and tried to make sense of the threat. The fox watched him close and slowly realized he wasn't an enemy. Heat flared through Jihan's body. The stab had been meant to kill, but vital points had been missed on purpose. Spitting out blood, he felt the poison taking hold. The leader coldly declared Jihan would be dead within 12 hours, unless he translated what the monsters said, brandishing an antidote as leverage. They held the fox captive, forcing Jihan to act as interpreter to learn where her clan lived. Jihan had never even known a fox people village existed. Confusion roiled through him, while the hunters explained that such a settlement did lie hidden nearby. The fox girl suddenly lunged, bared her fangs, and moved as if to bite her own tongue to end it all. A desperate act to avoid betrayal. The man yanked her back and stopped her. Watching that, Jihan understood how fiercely tied she must be to whatever family or pack she protected. The young girl's mouth was forced shut as the men mocked her. calling her a wild beast. The leader repeated that if she revealed her tribe's location, both she and Jahan might live. The word struck Jahan like a memory. He recalled that same cold, calculating stare from his old schoolmate, the one who used to blackmail him. Back then, he had lived under constant fear, always following orders, always being used. To everyone else, he was nothing but a tool to exploit. But this time, he refused to let things play out the same way. Despite the pain searing through his wound, he forced himself to move closer to the fox girl. He told her to lead them to the village, assuring that no one would get hurt. The men around him believed every word, convinced now that he could truly communicate with monsters. Lowering her head, the girl whispered that over 100 of her kind lived there, then asked if she could really trust him. Jahan held her gaze for a moment before admitting he wasn't on the side of humans. With one hand pressed to his bleeding stomach, he confessed he knew exactly how cruel they could be. As he turned forward, something caught his attention. His dragon was sneaking up behind the hunters, charging up its destructive energy. Fear shot through him. If this went wrong, they'd both die. He tried to stay calm, pretending nothing was happening while buying time for Reseldrak to finish gathering power, but his shift in demeanor didn't go unnoticed. The leader eyed him suspiciously, and the short man to the side spotted the creature, shouting a warning. The leader spun around, but by then, Jahan was sure enough time had passed. The dragon's red flames blazed to life, yet, to his disbelief, only a weak burst came out. The attack fizzled instantly. Jahan froze, stunned that it had failed again. The hunters stared, equally baffled, and even the poor dragon looked confused by the tiny spark it produced. Jahan realized then that Reseldrak hadn't recovered enough energy yet. The big man laughed, saying the blast was pathetic, though strong enough to burn if it had hit directly. Without hesitation, the leader snatched up a metal bat, calling the dragon a useless insect, and swung. Jahan could only watch as the blow connected. His small companion was launched through the air, hitting the ground hard and rolling several times before going limp. Dizzy and trembling, the creature lay motionless. Furious, the man cursed the dragon for daring to resist and advanced again, raising the bat for another strike. Jahan's body refused to move. He could only stare helplessly. The leader ordered his subordinates to restrain Jahan and the fox, while he dealt with the dragon himself. Reseldrak remained on the ground, unconscious. Grinding his teeth, Jahan felt the same bitter truth sink in. Once again, he only held value because of what he could do for others. Everything was repeating exactly as it had in his old world. He had spent his whole life living in humiliation, constantly bending himself just to satisfy others. Yet no matter how much he tried, he always ended up isolated and unwanted. Whatever happened, he knew one thing. He would never go back to that miserable reality. From that moment on, he swore he would never regret anything again. The leader raised his weapon, ready to crush the small dragon. Even the fox girl froze, horrified at what was about to unfold. Jahan's face hardened, and his body reacted instinctively. His passive monster ability activated, surging through him like fire. In a flash, he crossed the distance between them and swung his fist. The strike landed with bone-shattering force, sending the leader hurtling through the air. The ground split beneath the impact. The fox girl stood speechless, stunned by his raw strength, while the remaining henchmen stared in disbelief. Their leader lay motionless, face ruined beyond recognition. For once, Jahan had acted before it was too late. But in the chaos, the antidote that could have saved him shattered to pieces. The fox girl stared, confused by how he was even moving with poison coursing through his veins. Jahan ignored the pain and rushed to his fallen companion. Reseldrak's eyes fluttered open, and a faint smile crossed Jahan's face. He was proud of the little dragon for fighting until the end. The creature gave a small, joyful grin in return. Looking at him, Jahan felt a rush of warmth. The sight reminded him of Ruru, his little cat who had always stayed close, trying to comfort him when no one else did. That memory filled him with resolve. He made a silent promise. He would protect his new companion no matter what. His expression softened as he smiled faintly, thinking that, no matter what the future held, he and his partner would stand together. Behind them, the surviving hunters spat curses, threatening to report everything to their boss. Jahan turned toward them with cold fury, his glare enough to make them hesitate. Realizing what would come next, they panicked and fled into the woods. Reseldrak cheered weakly, proud of their victory. But the moment didn't last. Jahan's body gave out, his legs collapsing beneath him. He hit the ground hard as the fox girl rushed over. She stared in shock, thinking he might be gone. The little dragon whimpered, nudging his shoulder desperately. Jahan's eyes fluttered. His breathing was shallow, and he felt his strength slipping away. This had to be the end. His last image before blacking out was Reseldrak's worried face hovering over him. Then came the memory, the hospital room, the beeping machines, his mother lying frail and pale. He'd been alone back then too, abandoned while his father never once came to see them. The memory burned through him with the same ache as before. Slowly, consciousness crept back. When he opened his eyes, he realized he was being carried. The fox girl held him firmly as they made their way through a dark, winding cave. Soon, light appeared ahead. They emerged into a quiet village filled with beastkin, most of them resembling rabbits. The residents froze upon seeing him, whispering among themselves. Despite his human appearance, they could all sense it. His scent was that of a monster. They lingered near the window, whispering to each other, wondering when he would wake. But Jahan was already conscious. He simply didn't want that much attention. The fox girl soon stepped forward, asking the others to give him some room. From where he lay, Jahan immediately recognized her voice. When she entered, she asked if he was awake and explained that his presence had drawn interest. It was the first time anyone had seen a human in their village, and besides, he didn't even smell like one. Looking down at his hands, Jahan noticed something. The mark left by the poison was gone. The fox girl told him they had kept him in the village to recover. That was when it struck him. She had brought him here herself, risking her safety for someone who had once been her captor. She had saved his life. Puzzled, he asked why she did it. She replied that, despite how he looked, she could tell he wasn't truly one of them. Unsatisfied, he pressed her for another reason. Her eyes softened as she recalled a moment, how his concern for his dragon had moved her. Jahan wondered if that compassion was only the side effect of his friendly monster ability. But the girl grew irritated, snapping that he was still complaining even after being rescued. Nearby, Reseldrak stirred from his nap. When the dragon opened his eyes and saw Jahan awake, his tail began to flick excitedly. Yet he noticed immediately that Jahan and the fox were already bickering. The girl folded her arms, saying that now they were even. He had saved her once too. Before Jahan could respond, a cheerful sound filled the air. Reseldrak bounded toward him and jumped into his arms, nuzzling his chest while the fox watched silently. She broke the moment, saying they should at least know each other's names. But before she could speak, another villager appeared, announcing that the chief wanted to see them. They set off together, and as they walked, Jahan couldn't help but marvel at what he saw. The hidden settlement, tucked beyond the mountains, had been built by rabbit-type monsters. Over time, it had become a refuge for all hybrid species who had lost their homes. The residents worked together in peace, caring for one another with quiet devotion. Their path was soon blocked by a towering bull-type beast who demanded to know if the fox, Rhea, had gone to the human forest. She apologized quickly and continued on, but the bull's suspicious gaze lingered. Jahan called her by name, remarking that everyone here seemed to care about her deeply. Rhea lowered her eyes, her tone darkening when he asked if something was wrong. Then, suddenly, her mood flipped. She frowned, tilting her head, and asked why everyone called him Hey. Stepping closer, she demanded to know if that was really his name. Caught off guard by her confusion, Jahan finally introduced himself properly. The name sounded strange, out of place in this world. Without hesitation, the fox girl gave her full name, Rylindrian Pernidae Celiard, before turning away, leaving Jahan standing there, completely bewildered. One of the small rabbit villagers asked if Rhea was feeling any better, and she replied that she was. Jahan noticed her mood had lifted. It seemed all she'd really wanted was to share her name. As he looked around, his thoughts drifted back to his main goal, building a faction of monsters. Lost in thought, he barely noticed when Rhea called for him to keep moving. Even now, she still called him, Hey, and that small detail bothered him. Still, he jogged forward to catch up. When they reached the village chief, the old rabbit suddenly announced that Jahan would now take charge of the settlement. Both Jahan and Rhea froze in disbelief. Jahan quickly said he had no idea how to lead a village, but the old rabbit simply waved him off, saying he was too old to continue. Rhea demanded to know if the elder was really making such a decision just because of a dream. The old rabbit nodded, insisting that he wouldn't change his mind. Jahan stood there confused, trying to make sense of the situation. The elder explained that every dream he'd had always come true, and in this one, the person destined to save the village was Jahan. That word, savior, echoed in Jahan's mind. It reminded him of his current mission, establishing a monster faction. The title unsettled him. Being seen as a savior could only complicate things. He remembered that cursed man who had once tried to use him as a translator in exchange for his life. The thought sparked a sudden worry. He turned to Rhea and asked if anyone might have followed them on the way back. She assured him that the village's location was impossible to find. Hidden beyond the mountains, it was bordered by a vast, dangerous sea that no one dared to cross. The only other path lay through an underwater tunnel that twisted like a maze, designed to keep intruders out. According to her, she hadn't sensed anyone nearby. Still, Jahan couldn't shake a bad feeling. On the trail they had taken, faint streaks of red marked the ground. Blood, likely Rhea's. And deep within one of the caves nearby, a hidden figure watched the village. One of the human henchmen had found it and was already grinning to himself, celebrating the discovery. Moments later, noise erupted in the village, shouts spreading through the crowd. Someone was yelling about an intruder. Jahan and Rhea both froze as the words reached them. A human had been found inside the settlement. The bull beast immediately grew tense, cursing under his breath, while one of the smaller villagers muttered in confusion. Jahan rushed forward, asking if the intruders had followed them. Rhea's face went pale. Shaken, she asked if the humans had been trailing her all along, insisting she'd made sure no one had. Then, guilt written all over her face, she began to apologize, saying it was her fault. But the bull shook his head firmly, saying it wasn't. The bull told Rhea not to blame herself, saying she'd simply been too weak to notice what was happening. Her friends echoed his words, trying to comfort her, insisting it wasn't her fault. Jahan's thoughts drifted back to the men who had ambushed them. There had been 3 of them. The short one, still in the village, grinned darkly and warned that the whole place would soon be burning. His voice carried a cruel edge as he revealed he was part of a group called the Screaming Hall. Within minutes, he said, 200 men would arrive. Jahan's brow furrowed. The name meant nothing to him at first. What was this Screaming Hall? Meanwhile, deep in the forest, the other 2 henchmen limped along, battered but alive. The leader of the trio stumbled into his superior's tent, still crying from the beating, demanding revenge. The man sitting before him didn't respond right away. He listened in silence as they explained what had happened. Then, one of them shouted that they had found the Fox village and could lead the way. The boss of the Screaming Hall smiled thinly, pleased with the discovery. He ordered his men to move out immediately. His servant, nearly shaking with excitement, rushed to prepare. Back in the village, the short henchman laughed to himself, boasting that he wasn't the only one who had made it this far. He explained that all 3 of them had followed Rhea through the forest. Their leader had told them not to return yet. It was the perfect chance to track the girl and find her people. His laughter turned cruel as he claimed that soon everyone there would die. The young fox looked confused, unable to understand his words, though she sensed the malice behind them. She turned to Jahan, calling his name in alarm. His expression darkened as he explained that their location had been exposed and reinforcements were on the way. Rhea froze, horror settling over her. Jahan's mind began to race as he tried to piece everything together. The name Screaming Hall stirred something familiar, a memory from the game Night Defense. In that game, players earned experience by fending off endless monster waves, but leveling alone wasn't enough to survive. There was another mechanic, the Adventurer's System, where players could send knights on missions through 100 stages, from the ruins of the wild goblins to the demon fortress. Jahan remembered the final part clearly, a stage involving the hideout of a gang called Screaming All, hidden behind a rocky hill. The story attached to that stage matched exactly what he was hearing now. Yet his anxiety grew. None of this terrain matched any stage he remembered. According to the game's map, this entire region was supposed to be destroyed. The short man broke the silence again, offering a deal. If someone released him, he promised that his boss would spare their lives. Jahan knew only he could understand the man's words, but he didn't need to translate. The hybrids could feel what those words meant. Rhea lowered her head, guilt weighing heavy on her shoulders. She whispered that this was all her fault. The captured man kept shouting, demanding to be freed. Jihan's expression hardened. He wasn't about to let the village be destroyed. While the short, obnoxious prisoner continued to rant, Jihan stepped closer. The man sneered and told him to translate his words for everyone else. But Jihan wasn't in the mood. His fist tightened, and with one swift motion, he drove it straight into the man's face. The blow sent the henchman flying. his scream echoing through the clearing. The bull hybrid stood frozen, astonished by Jihan's strength. Even the small rabbit villagers stared wide-eyed, stunned. Rhea, too, couldn't believe what she had just witnessed. The man lay motionless on the ground, barely conscious, while Jihan stood firm, ready to fight if it came to that. Rhea's heart pounded as she heard him say he would do anything to protect them. But the bull stepped forward, explaining grimly that fighting was impossible. The village was filled with the weak, mostly women, children, and the elderly. Just then, the old chief appeared and called everyone together. As the villagers gathered, he raised his voice and made a declaration that left everyone speechless. Jihan would be the new chief of the village. Far away, the mercenary gang advanced through the forest. Their leader's eyes gleamed as they reached the rocky hill. The reports had been true. The Fox village was hidden right behind it. Grinning, he announced that this place would soon serve as their new base. With that, he ordered his men forward. Back in the village, the bull explained their situation. The enemy force was about 200 strong. Their own group was tiny. Only a few bull warriors, 2 young deer, 5 sheep hybrids, and 1 fox girl. Including the rabbits, their total barely reached 112. He asked Jihan if they stood any chance. Jihan replied bluntly that the enemy's strength was nearly double theirs. But then a thought struck him. Numbers weren't everything. He remembered how Rhea had fought those men on her own, and realized that if she could handle 3 by herself, others might not be as helpless as they seemed. Even if the villagers lacked combat experience, hybrids were known to grow stronger when transforming into their animal forms. If everyone had even a fraction of Rhea's strength, there was hope. He turned to the bull and asked how powerful she truly was. The hybrid scratched his chin, watching the fox play with the small dragon nearby, then admitted she was easily the strongest in the village. The statement left Jihan silent. The bull added that even if every villager united against her, Rhea would still emerge victorious. That truth sank heavy in Jihan's mind. Knowing this, he realized he had to act fast. His head dropped slightly as he weighed the consequences. Compared to her, the rest of the villagers were practically defenseless. As they discussed their next move, the young fox mentioned that there was still time before the humans arrived. Jihan frowned, not understanding how she could be so sure. She pointed to the short prisoner, explaining that she had asked him directly. Jihan recalled that one of the henchmen had said their boss was searching for something he had lost. He turned to Rhea, asking if she had any idea what that might be. The girl shook her head and said their village was nothing more than a small refuge for displaced creatures. Hearing that, Jihan guessed the enemy might be using that as a convenient excuse for invasion. Before he could think further, the bull hybrid Tor called out that everyone had gathered. It was time for Jihan to present a plan. He knew that to stand a chance against superior numbers, individual stats would have to compensate for their lack of manpower. The strongest fighter among them was the fox girl. He'd confirmed that much. If she could handle 3 opponents at once, their odds might improve, but even then, he wasn't certain. He began to wonder if raw power depended on species, and thought how useful it would be if he could see everyone's stats. Then it hit him, the demon eye ability. Maybe it could analyze what he needed. In the game, he had triggered it by opening the status screen, so he attempted the same, but nothing happened. He frowned, frustration tightening his chest. Nothing appeared, and the silence around him only made it worse. A moment later, however, a faint red glow flickered before his eyes. An inventory window. It was empty. Still, one detail stood out. Its title wasn't the same as when he had played on the kingdom's side. That difference reminded him of something bitter. Back in the kingdom, he had obtained that incredibly powerful sword, the one strong enough to destroy the entire palace. Now he felt a stab of regret for having left it behind. Since the inventory window had appeared, he couldn't understand why the status screen refused to open. He went through his abilities in his mind. 4 passives. The demon eye that revealed information, the power to communicate with both humans and monsters, the charisma that attracted others to him, and finally, his monstrous physical strength that surpassed human limits. Annoyed, he muttered that he needed to make a decision soon. The fox tried to steady herself, saying she would follow his lead, her voice tinged with guilt. She blamed herself for the crisis and insisted she had to protect the village. Jihan could tell the weight of that guilt was crushing her, and time was slipping away fast. Then suddenly his right eye burned with light. A crimson gleam flooded his vision. When he looked at the fox, lines of information flickered faintly across her face. Focusing, he realized he could lock onto a target. The realization hit him immediately. The ability worked through intent. It activated whenever he looked at someone and consciously decided what he wanted to examine. The red glow sharpened in Jihan's eye, and a set of numbers and letters appeared before him. He saw his own classification, rank B. A small surge of excitement hit him. That ranking matched an average knight's level in the game. Shifting his focus, he turned his attention toward Rhea. Her stats appeared clearly, and one thing stood out. Her attack power far exceeded the rest. While she continued speaking beside him, Jihan wasn't paying attention. His mind was locked on the glowing skill window. A small heart icon caught his eye, and he wondered what it represented. Instinctively, he reached out to touch it. Only when Rhea flinched did he realize what he'd done. His finger had poked her nose. Trying to brush it off, he muttered that it hadn't been intentional. But the fox girl's face flushed with anger, and in the next second she lunged at him, claws out. After the brief scuffle, Jihan called for Tor, asking him to gather everyone in the village. A thin scratch now marked his cheek, but he assured them it was nothing serious. Soon the villagers assembled just as he requested. He needed them all in one place to analyze their stats. The process was long and exhausting, each scan draining his focus. When it was finally over, he exhaled in relief. The results confirmed what he had suspected. He could now tell who was strong and who wasn't. Even as a hatchling, Rezeldrak was still the most powerful among them. His attacks carried immense destructive force, though they drained all his mana in one burst. With that limitation, Jihan knew the dragon wouldn't be able to fight this time. That left only Rhea, a rank B, and Tor, who was rank C. The rest of the villagers fell into lower tiers, the weakest of all. Even without seeing the enemy levels, Jihan could guess the approaching mercenaries averaged around rank C. The realization tightened his chest. They were outmatched in every way, fewer in number, lacking proper skills and equipment. Under these conditions, defending the village would be impossible, but this wasn't a game anymore. The rules were different here. He looked around the settlement and began thinking. If he couldn't rely on stats, he could rely on the environment, create variables that wouldn't exist in a game. His mind raced with possibilities. Calling Rhea and Tor over, he told them they needed to plan a new strategy. Meanwhile, far beyond the mountain, the gang pressed forward. Their leader walked at the front, flanked by 2 rabbit scouts moving ahead to check the path. The young male rabbit turned to his sister, whispering that they should return to warn the others. Before they could move, a sharp sound cut the air. The boy dropped instantly, struck in the head. The girl froze, horrified, staring at her brother's body lying motionless on the ground. The one who had struck him was the screaming hall leader himself. A cruel grin spread across the man's face as he stepped past the corpse, leaving the girl trembling. Tears welled in her eyes before she shut them tight and bolted, shifting into her rabbit form as she fled through the forest. One of the henchmen asked if they should chase her, but the leader waved him off with a smirk. His voice was low and venomous as he said there was no need. He was already spreading the infection. The village was in motion, every hybrid working together to put the plan into action. Tension filled the air as they prepared for what was coming. Then, through the misty entrance, the little rabbit who had escaped earlier came running, her eyes wide with panic. Jihan immediately noticed she was alone. The girl stumbled forward, shouting that the humans had already arrived. Even Tor, the bull, froze at her words. Rhea stepped forward, confused, asking why the rabbit's fur was soaked in red liquid, but the girl was too terrified to explain clearly. She kept repeating the same thing. The humans were already here. Despite the panic spreading around him, Jihan stayed composed. He was the first line of defense for the monster faction, and he was ready. Gritting his teeth, he swore he wouldn't let the village fall. Far from the village, the mercenary gang finally reached the cave entrance. Their leader asked if this was truly the fox's den, and his men confirmed it. Confident, they pushed forward, determined to finish everything before sunset. Back in the village, Rhea's ears twitched. Her heightened senses caught something. The humans were getting closer. She turned toward Jihan, asking if he was sure the plan would work. The gang kept moving deeper, following the mapped route. The leader estimated they would reach the village within 30 minutes. The air felt still, almost too quiet, and he muttered that the silence meant they were being watched. One of his hairy subordinates grinned, promising to take revenge for the humiliation they'd suffered before. Then a sound broke the stillness, a faint creak beneath their boots. The ground began to tremble. Cracks spread rapidly across the tunnel floor before anyone could react. With a loud crash, the ground gave way. Several men plummeted into the hole, shouting in pain as they hit the bottom. Those who stayed above backed away just in time, dust and gravel raining over them. The leader barely managed to grab one of his men by the arm, pulling him from the edge. Below, groans filled the air. Some had twisted legs and broken bones. The hairy subordinate growled that the villagers had laid traps along the path. The leader's face darkened as he examined the floor ahead. He realized what had happened. The enemy had dug pits and covered them with wooden boards disguised by dust and debris. Any heavy step was enough to make the ground collapse. Another man muttered that none of this had been here the day before. The leader didn't respond. Instead, he moved forward, his patience thinning. As his men followed, he cursed under his breath, their confusion growing as they watched him pick up a large rock with ease. Without warning, he hurled it ahead. The stone slammed into the ground and instantly broke through it. Another pit trap. The leader smirked. He explained that the tunnel was originally solid rock, which made it easy to tell where traps had been dug. Any section filled with loose dirt or gravel would collapse. Following his lead, his men began to spot the differences. The rocky patches were safe, while the dusty ones were not. Feeling satisfied, the leader declared that humans like them wouldn't fall for such simple tricks again. He ordered a few of his men to stay behind and pull the injured out of the hole. Meanwhile, inside the village, Ria's sharp ears caught faint echoes, the sound of the enemy realizing their traps had been discovered. Jihan grinned. Everything was unfolding exactly as planned. He had counted on the enemy discovering the traps. Digging through the rock would slow them down for hours, and even if it only worked once, it was enough. In truth, there were only 2 real traps. The rest were fake, just decoys to waste their time. That was the point, to stall them for as long as possible. Deeper inside the tunnel, the gang pressed forward. Some of the men moved cautiously now, terrified of another pitfall. As they advanced, one of the subordinates warned that a crossroads was up ahead. When the leader saw it, he frowned. There weren't 2 paths like before. There were 3. The long-haired man muttered that he didn't remember a split like this, swearing that it hadn't been there earlier. He pointed out a bush near the wall, recognizing it as a clear sign of deception. The leader narrowed his eyes, realizing what was happening. It was another stall tactic. They were trying to buy time, probably preparing something inside the village. He wouldn't let that happen. He ordered his troops to divide into smaller squads. The long-haired man would take the left tunnel. The large brute would lead the middle route. The leader himself would go right. The left group advanced first, only to hit a dead end where the tunnel had collapsed. Meanwhile, the middle group spotted faint light ahead and assumed it was the exit. Their commander signaled everyone to get ready for a fight. The left group soon saw light too, convincing them they were also near the surface. Believing he had chosen the correct path, the leader ordered that no hybrid should be left alive. The group surged forward without hesitation. But on the right-hand path, the one the leader took, things were different. His squad emerged not into the village, but into the middle of the forest. He realized immediately that he had been misled again. Back at the true exit, the middle group broke through into the village perimeter. Their commander barked an order to hold position and sent one of the men back to alert the boss. The runner turned, only to find a strange sight. One of their own was tied to a tree, gagged and struggling. The bound man's eyes darted wildly. Sweat poured down his face as muffled cries escaped the cloth in his mouth. He tried to ask for the boss, but before anyone could react, he noticed something. They were surrounded. The messenger spun around and bolted back toward the crossroads. He had to warn the leader. But before he could reach the tunnel bend, the air erupted with a deafening blast. A wave of smoke burst through the cave, throwing several men against the stone walls. The explosion had come from above. The Fox Girl and Jihan had triggered it perfectly. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. The traps had done their job. Every second they bought mattered. The enemy's forces were now scattered and divided across the tunnels. After hearing what happened to the earlier group, the short man grew uneasy, his confidence fading fast. Suddenly, the large brute turned his head, catching movement from the shadows. All around them, the villagers were waiting, hidden and ready to strike. Jihan stepped out beside Ria, emerging from the darkness. Taking charge, he signaled the villagers to move. From a high ledge overlooking the battlefield, he watched with satisfaction as the plan unfolded perfectly. The opposing commander barked orders for his own men to counterattack. Both sides now stood face to face, the air tense, seconds away from erupting into chaos. The mercenary leader hefted his massive hammer, preparing to crush anyone who got in his way. Jihan raised his voice, giving a single command. It was time for the hybrids to transform. In an instant, smoke burst across the area, swallowing everything. The human soldiers staggered, confused, wondering if the villagers had vanished. But it was all part of the plan. Jihan had learned earlier that when the beast folk transformed, their bodies released a dense mist. He'd turned that natural trait into a battle tactic. Hidden in the haze, no one could tell where the next strike would come from. From within the cloud, Tor the bull emerged first, gripping a massive stone above his head. He charged forward with brute force. Further out, human soldiers called out in panic, unsure what was happening. The smaller rabbit fighters seized the moment. They targeted the isolated ones, launching surprise attacks while others dug beneath the ground, grabbing ankles and throwing enemies off balance. Distracted soldiers were suddenly hit from above, swift kicks to the face and chest from unseen directions. One young mercenary screamed and bolted, overwhelmed by the chaos. Elsewhere, 3 men tried to subdue a sheep hybrid, only to find their blows passing through empty air. Their target moved too fast, slipping between strikes like smoke. In another section, shouts erupted as several humans clutched their heads, scalded by streams of hot liquid. Above them hovered little Rezoldrak, spitting bursts of fiery breath with the last of his strength. So far, Jihan and Rhea hadn't needed to join the fray. The battle was flowing exactly as planned. Still, he stayed alert, watching every shift in the fight. Nearby, the short man regrouped with 2 of his allies, weapons drawn. They aimed at the rabbits tunneling through the soil, hoping to catch them off guard. Seeing the danger, Jihan called for Rhea. The fox girl darted forward, a blur of motion. Even Jihan, who had seen her fight before, was stunned by her speed. She reached the group in mere seconds, but the short man behind them was already readying his crossbow. He fired. The arrow cut through the air, heading straight for Rhea. She saw it a heartbeat before impact, and to everyone's disbelief, twisted her body just enough to dodge it. Rhea shifted her stance, her body flowing with sharp precision as she readied her next move. Without hesitation, she launched forward, her legs slicing through the air and connecting hard with a man's face. He smirked, thinking he'd managed to block her blow, but her speed was beyond what he could follow. Before he could recover, she swept low, spinning from the ground and striking again. This time, her kick landed clean, sending him crashing backward. Without stopping, Rhea pivoted toward the next opponent and drove her heel into his jaw, knocking him flat. The last one, the short man, cursed under his breath, demanding to know what she was doing. They squared off, eyes locked. Then, in a flash, she struck again. Her leg snapped upward and came down with crushing force, slamming his head into the dirt. Groaning, the man clutched his bruised face while the fox girl stood tall. In mere moments, she had taken all 3 down. Her cold glare swept over them, daring any to underestimate her again. Across the battlefield, the large brute took in the scene. His men were losing, badly. Rage twisted his features as veins bulged along his arms. With a guttural growl, he triggered his ability. His muscles swelled, doubling in size as raw power coursed through him. Jihan, watching from afar, recognized the transformation immediately. Only C-rank knights, or stronger, could wield active abilities like that. A burst of power that enhanced their physical strength. The rabbits nearby froze, trembling as the ground shook beneath the brute's steps. But the man's confidence vanished when a massive shadow loomed before him. A colossal hand gripped a fallen tree trunk, ripping it from the ground with ease. Standing there was Tor, the bull hybrid, towering at nearly twice the man's size. The brute's face went pale, words failing him. From his vantage point, Jihan observed the encounter with wide eyes. He hadn't expected Tor to be that powerful. His plan was unfolding better than imagined. Meanwhile, deep inside the cave, the long-haired mercenary grew restless. None of his allies had returned from the other tunnels. Muttering curses, he finally decided to move. Pointing toward the path the larger fighter had taken, he ordered his group to follow that route. Back in the village, victory was already sealed. Every remaining invader had been captured and buried. Jihan turned to Tor, asking if his legs were holding up after the fight. The bull nodded, though the exhaustion showed. Even though the villagers outnumbered their enemies, many were injured. But Jihan refused to slow down now. He could sense more soldiers approaching from the cave's exit. He called to Tor again, ordering him to prepare the next line of defense. The bull grunted and began distributing weapons to everyone. He turns away and brings Tar, one of his strongest allies, over to speak with him. Jihan then reveals a heap of weapons and has them handed out to every soldier. The fighters step forward and take their new gear without delay. At this stage, every ally is armed and ready to fight. Once he confirms that preparations are complete, Jihan triggers his special skill, known as the Eye of the Ruler. Through this power, he clearly sees that the attack strength of the group has nearly doubled. The white-haired boy feels genuine satisfaction and surprise at how effective it is. At the same time, a team of humans advances toward the village camp. Their leader feels unsure, certain that the hideout was meant to be there. Still, something feels wrong, since the entire area is silent. Moments later, he faces a disturbing sight as several people are found buried in the ground. Shock freezes him, his mind unable to grasp what took place. Behind him, his companions panic when they notice the scene. The leader soon realizes that every buried person is still alive. He tries to call out to the hostages and intends to free them, only to notice that the ground is riddled with holes. Before he can move closer, 2 rabbits leap at him swinging clubs. Right then, a piercing scream echoes across the canyon. Elsewhere, another squad of warriors rushes ahead. Their leader grows irritated, aware that without a map they have no sense of direction. One of the men points out a passage, claiming it is the correct route. He also notes that beyond it lies a fork in the road. The leader quickly senses danger and signals for everyone to keep their distance. One of the men reacts too late as the ground begins to crumble. As the floor trembles, a warrior loses footing and falls. Yet the mechanism fails to activate fully, leaving the entire group baffled. Confusion spreads as one man questions why the trap did not work. Without hesitation, the leader tightens his grip on his spear and takes action. Using force, he strikes the ground to test it. To his surprise, the surface is solid stone, raising doubts in his mind. With a bitter laugh, he realizes that only the cave entrance was rigged. The realization angers him, knowing he had been led around on purpose. A cruel grin forms as he swears to destroy every enemy he finds. Moments later, one of his men rushes in, exhausted and barely able to speak. The report comes that the passage through the central tunnel has finally been located. The leader's expression hardens as he absorbs the information. Back in the village, word spreads that all captures have been completed successfully. Jihan acknowledges his allies' efforts and approves of how the prisoners were secured. The white-haired boy then explains that at the fork, a wall can be broken down. By doing this, a hidden route was opened that connected back to the entrance. This strategy ensured the group gained enough time to fully prepare for the coming battle. Jihan understands that lasting a bit longer is all it takes to secure victory. Even so, one of the captives buried in the ground starts to mock him. The man claims everything will end once their older brother finally shows up. He goes on to expose that their true leader is Scream Spike, someone far stronger than the rest. Without warning, a girl steps in and kicks the captive in the face, cutting him off. She quickly reports to Jihan that she counted 60 enemies, with only 5 still able to fight on their side. Jihan works it out in his head, judging that the remaining bandits, including their leader, number around 60. He knows his group is at a clear disadvantage, having already fought twice and grown tired. Still, those battles gave them real experience. Because of that, everyone is tougher and mentally ready for what comes next. The white-haired boy shows confidence, aware that they have grown stronger. His only issue is that the new sword feels heavier than expected. Just then, heavy footsteps echo closer. Rhea senses the presence first and alerts everyone that the enemy has arrived. The buried captive grows excited and calls out for his older brother. The bandit chief scans his own men and treats them as useless. His attention then shifts to Jihan, suspecting the entire situation was a setup. Jihan throws the idea back, treating it as nothing more than solid planning. The bandit leader smiles, noting how bold the boy has become. He makes it clear that while the earlier wins were pleasant, a third victory will not happen. Jihan shows no concern and moves to put forward terms. The bandit leader immediately rejects the idea, insisting this is not negotiation, but coercion. Jihan raises his blade toward the man's brother and signals for all weapons to be dropped. He makes it clear that refusal will end in his brother's death. The bandit leader does not reply, his face stiff and unreadable. The captured man cries out in fear as Jihan recognizes how cruel the move is. Still, he knows this is not a moment for honor and questions whether the enemy will comply. Against all expectations, the bandit chief releases his spear, letting it hit the ground. Instead of surrendering, he begins chanting, activating a strange power. Jihan is caught off guard, having never expected this response. A purple glow spreads over the bandits, and the skill name Scream Spike becomes clear. Jihan quickly understands that it is a wide-range buff that raises the strength of allies. Even without numbers, his companions immediately feel the surge in enemy power. The shift is extreme, and Jihan realizes just how much their combat ability has jumped. The bandit leader roars for a full assault. The clash begins at once, and the empowered bandits start to control the field. During the chaos, one of Jihan's allies is forced to fight someone far bigger. The enemy strikes hard and wounds one of the small rabbits during the exchange. Watching this, another rabbit snaps and smashes the attacker with a club. Though hurt, the enemy grips his arm, glaring at the two rabbits standing before him. Another bandit, eyes glowing, mocks them, questioning if they are ready to give up. The two rabbits shake in fear, overwhelmed by the pressure. The opponent suddenly grabs one of them and laughs cruelly, clearly enjoying the moment. Tar suddenly enters the battlefield and swings his massive hammer, sending one of the bandits flying through the air. At the sight of the giant, the enemies quickly throw ropes, aiming to restrain Jihan's ally. The ropes coil around Tar's body and weapon, nearly locking him in place. Several opponents pull together with all their strength, trying to drag him down. The Minotaur struggles to hold his ground, but the combined force eventually pulls him to the floor. With the giant pinned, the bandits move in, ready to deal a killing strike. They close in around Tar and urge everyone to strike the giant at once. Right then, flaming sheep are hurled into the crowd of bandits. At the same time, small creatures are launched as makeshift weapons toward the archers. Jihan quickly understands that despite better gear and hard-earned experience, his side is losing control of the fight. Concern takes over as the white-haired boy searches the field for Rhea. Elsewhere, Rhea narrowly avoids a strike and counters by kicking an enemy's arm. She lands, only to find herself surrounded by several bandits laughing at her. Her breathing grows heavy, exhaustion clear as her enemies watch closely. With her face tight from fatigue, she bites her lip and braces herself for what might come. From a distance, Jihan sees that his ally has reached her limit. One of the bunny girls is struck as well, crashing to the ground and suffering severe injury. Jihan pushes himself up, realizing that if this continues, defeat is certain. With steady resolve, he decides the only way forward is to take down the enemy leader. Locked onto that goal, he spots the bandit boss shouting commands across the field. Nearby, one of the bandits moves in to finish Tar, but Jihan closes the distance. Seeing this, the white-haired boy calls out to his giant ally, who meets his gaze. In that instant, Jihan recalls a talk from before the battle. In that memory, he asks Tar to hold back his final form until receiving a sign. Returning to the present, the giant understands his master's intent and readies himself. One of the enemies yells in anger, urging his men to end the giant on the ground. Several henchmen lift their weapons together, preparing to strike. Jihan then gives the signal, shouting for Tar to unleash his power. The Minotaur rises as energy surges around him, boosting his defense and vitality by half. With his ally transformed, Jihan lets out a cry, and the two charge side by side. The white-haired boy knows they have only 3 minutes before the plan moves to its next stage. Their target is clear, and the bandit leader must be captured within that window. The enemy chief, however, shows no fear, and stands with a mocking grin. In answer, the giant roars, gathering strength for a decisive strike. With rage burning in his eyes, he lashes out using the whip fixed to his arm. The impact sends one henchman flying while screaming in pain. Still, the bandit leader calmly grabs the rope and orders the giant to stop. Ignoring him, the Minotaur leaps forward, fist raised to crush his foe. The enemy dodges swiftly, and the punch slams into the ground, kicking up dust. Wearing a smug expression, the leader mocks the giant for growing larger without real strength. Using that moment, Jihan bursts through the dust, launching an attack from behind. It becomes clear that the giant's assault was meant as a decoy, allowing Jihan to close the gap. In the next instant, Jihan feels a chill as he understands that the plan has failed. The bandit leader displays overwhelming power and flings the Minotaur aside without effort. Before the giant can rise, a heavy kick crashes into his body. The enemy then leaps high into the air, lining up a brutal finishing blow for Tar. Exhausted and hurt, Jihan can only watch, unable to save his ally. The villain slams down with immense force, smashing the ground and carving out a massive crater. He turns toward Jihan with a twisted grin, clearly enjoying the chaos. Gathering strength, he jumps again, aiming to crush the boy still on the ground. Elsewhere, Rhea shows her skill and quickly takes down another foe. At the same time, Jihan fails to evade and takes a crushing hit head-on. Rhea cries out in despair at the sight, even as blood runs from her wounds. Despite the pain, the white-haired boy refuses to give in. As he lies there, he recalls the moment he studied his own combat status. He knows his raw power is far below that of his two allies. Still, he stays down, aware that he has one last option left. With his face injured, he understands that against a human foe, he holds an edge. A screen appears before him, revealing his passive skill known as Physical Monster. His eyes glow as Jihan releases every bit of power he had kept hidden. This ability holds deadly strength when used against human enemies. Sensing the shift, the bandit leader freezes, caught off guard. When facing humans, all of Jihan's attributes surge by 200%. With this sudden boost, Jihan drives a devastating punch straight into the villain's face. Rhea freezes in disbelief at her master's sudden rise in power. Even the giant Tar is left stunned, unable to speak at what he witnesses. From above, the white-haired boy stands over the bandit leader lying on the ground. Jihan believes he hears something crack from the enemy's neck under the force of the hit. Yet to his shock, the bandit leader slowly pushes himself up, acting as if nothing happened. Blood runs down the villain's face as he wears a mocking grin, repeating that there would be no third victory. The look in his eyes is unstable and twisted. Jihan feels despair creeping in, struggling to understand how such a monster can be beaten. The bandit leader suddenly grips Jihan's fist with crushing strength. The pressure is overwhelming, forcing the boy down to one knee without any chance to resist. Jihan braces himself with one hand on the ground, completely overpowered. With firm resolve, he tells himself that he cannot fall now. Still, the enemy seizes his head, preparing to end it. Using all his strength, the villain smashes Jihan's face into the ground without mercy. Jihan struggles, but the grip pins him down completely. Wearing a cruel smile, the bandit leader lifts Jihan's face so everyone can see. He wants his allies to witness the defeat of the village leader. The others watch in despair, crying out for their chief. Even Tar stands frozen in shock, unable to do anything to save his master. At that point, the Minotaur calls out toward Rhea as she rushes in to save Jihan. Before she can reach him, one of the bandits raises a crossbow to block her path. An arrow strikes her leg, yet she keeps moving despite the injury. Gritting through the pain, she forces herself forward, focused only on helping her master. Jihan notices her approach and feels a surge of concern for her safety. With his face pressed against the ground, he desperately tries to warn her of the danger. The bandit leader, convinced time has run out for them, announces that the end has come. He raises his voice to the field, making sure everyone hears what he has to say. With clear satisfaction, he declares the conflict finished and claims total victory. To seal it, he gives a final command to his men to burn everything down. Pinned and helpless, Jihan can do nothing but watch in horror. The henchmen carry out the order, hurling flaming torches into the village. Fire quickly spreads through the crops and stored harvest. Nearby haystacks ignite almost at once. The flames reflect in Jihan's eyes as despair fully takes hold of him. Not long after, one of the village homes is completely swallowed by fire. A bunny girl cries out in panic as the blaze spreads unchecked. With chaos everywhere, the villagers start fleeing to escape the flames. The bandits enjoy the destruction, tossing more torches without restraint. Two residents stand frozen, watching the fire with no hope left. The villain makes it clear that war was never as simple as Jihan believed. He reinforces the truth that the losing side always loses everything. Elsewhere, several bandits mockingly bind a child from the Tar race. The giant is forced to watch as friends and family are taken one by one. Amid the disorder, a rabbit girl tries to help a friend injured earlier in the fight. The villain makes it known that Jihan's base, along with everything he built, will be wiped out. With a hand tightening around Jihan's neck, he continues to mock his defeat. He then lifts the boy off the ground, making it clear that even his life will be taken. Even wounded, Rhea witnesses everything, powerless and overwhelmed. Jihan struggles to break free, but the grip on his throat is far too strong. The bandit leader questions whether the boy still refuses to surrender, treating the battle as finished. Jihan, however, refuses to yield, holding on to the belief that he cannot lose. In that moment, a brief memory surfaces. He recalls a woman smiling gently at him. He remembers her wish for her son to form bonds and befriend a girl. He remembers his goal of returning to that time and destroying the human faction. Driven by that memory, He forces out his resolve, declaring that he will not stop until his ultimate goal is reached. With everything he has left, the white-haired boy unleashes his determination, refusing to give up. This sudden willpower leaves his allies stunned. The giant and the fox girl look toward him with renewed hope in their eyes. The villain reacts only with laughter, questioning what refusal alone could change. He makes it clear that Jihan's part in the war is finished. Pressing a dagger to the boy's neck, he signals that this is the true end. At that instant, a bright full moon shines directly into Ria's eyes. The bandit leader still holds Jihan in the air, ready to strike the last blow. Then, without warning, a blood-soaked hand slowly lifts from the ground, rising as if reaching out for help. The enemy leader freezes, his body locked in place as confusion takes over. At the same moment, Ria's hand begins to change, sharp claws forming at her fingertips. The white-haired boy turns his attention to her, sensing that something about her has shifted. He recalls how strange it always felt that others awakened through mana, while Ria never did. No matter how much mana she held, her power never surfaced. Even when facing death, she had never shown this form. In that instant, Jihan finally understands. Her race's awakening carried a strict limit. That condition was the full moon, whose light doubled all her abilities. Filled with new strength, the girl faces her master, waiting for his next command. Jihan responds with a calm smile, calling her name as his order. In a flash, Ria lunges forward. The bandit leader cries out in pain as his wounded arm is struck. Jihan follows her movements as she cuts across the battlefield at extreme speed. Enraged by the injury, the bandit boss lashes out at her, labeling her a beast. Ria remains calm, slipping past the attack with ease. Seizing the opening, she moves in close and drives her claws into him, delivering a killing blow. Seeing his older brother fall, the captive stands frozen in shock. With a single strike, Ria sends the bandit leader's body flying aside. Cold-eyed, she turns to the prisoner and shuts him down without mercy. The remaining bandits fall silent as they witness how easily their leader was defeated. With his fall, the buff fades, and their borrowed strength drains away. At the same time, the fires continue to spread, tearing through what remains of the village. Jihan watches the flames, fully aware that the night will bring another shift. A system message appears, warning that monsters gain a 20% boost after nightfall. A confident smile appears on Jihan's face. This was the moment he had been waiting for. As darkness settles, a red aura ignites around all of Jihan's allies. Empowered, the giant finally shatters the chains holding him. One of the bunny girls rises and calls for everyone to fight back with all they have. Fueled by their leader's resolve, the warriors roar in unison, vowing to drive the humans away. Watching the balance turn, the bandits fall into panic, realizing the battle is lost. With a focused expression, Jihan faces his companions and prepares the final command. At his signal, every ally charges toward the remaining enemies. Soon after, the rabbit warriors shout that the humans are fleeing and rush to capture them. As victory becomes clear, Jihan reflects on his mistakes, realizing he had been reckless and too sure of his plan. Even exhausted, one of the bunny girls lifts her arms high, shouting that they finally won. Yet the first battle in this world ends in total ruin. Jihan stares at the aftermath, seeing that more than half the village has burned to ash. Many allies lie dead or badly injured across the ground. Tears streak down his face as guilt weighs on him, knowing he could have done better. At that moment, the fox girl steps closer, making it clear that he does not have to bear everything alone. Ria stays by his side and comforts him, reminding him that everyone's strength works in different ways. She recalls that even when facing a clear disadvantage, he kept fighting with everything he had. Even after losing, the white-haired boy never once thought about abandoning the fight. She finishes by making it clear that he did everything possible within his limits. As she speaks, to show her support, with a gentle smile, she urges him to keep watching over everyone as the village chief. The words from his ally leave the white-haired boy speechless. Without warning, the system displays a notice that the affinity between them has risen to 50. Seeing this, Ria's face turns bright red, caught off guard by the update. Flustered and embarrassed, she quickly offers to help with cleanup and runs off, leaving Jihan confused behind her. In the ruined camp, everyone begins working together to rebuild what was lost. Still, Jihan understands that this is far from the end, and that everything is only beginning. Soon after, a system window announces that the second main mission has been completed. The monster faction population is now a total of 82. As a reward, he is granted the option to receive a random skill and must decide whether to accept it immediately. With steady resolve, Jihan vows not to repeat the same mistakes. He chooses to accept the reward and learns the weapon refinement skill. Several days pass and the village slowly takes shape again through everyone's effort. While working, Jihan hears Rhea calling out to him from the roof of one of the houses. He tosses a snack in her direction to pull her attention back. Smiling, she catches it mid-air and insists that her master should eat first. Jihan accepts the food, pleased at first, but his expression shifts when he realizes it is carrots again. Rhea explains that although the carrot fields burned, the stored food remained untouched. Confused, Jihan wonders why they are eating vegetables when they belong to the fox race. With a gloomy look, he concludes that everyone has been forced into vegetarian life. He then changes the topic and checks on her injured leg. Rhea assures him that she can walk again and plans to help with reconstruction as well. Jihan notes just how impressive their vitality and recovery truly are. Because of this, the village is rebuilt at a fast pace, and 2 weeks pass since the battle. During that time, funerals are held for all who lost their lives, excluding those who fled. The 55 captured bandits are brought to trial. Most villagers demand quick revenge for their fallen comrades. However, taking the lives of unarmed captives is not an easy choice. After long arguments and heavy debate, a final decision is reached. To everyone's surprise, the prisoners are released. Even so, they are not set free without consequence. Before sending them off by boat, a note is left identifying them as members of the Scream Spike Gang. Jihan explains that the sea is filled with dangerous monsters. If fate allows, they may reach the kingdom and face the punishment they deserve. Afterward, the white-haired boy reveals an important discovery. He learns that the bandits were searching for a specific item their leader desperately wanted. By chance, the house of one of his allies survived the fire. Curious about the object, Jihan decides to activate the Eye of the Ruler to investigate further. Using his vision, he quickly identifies the objects as enhancement stones of different ranks. His attention then locks onto a green stone glowing softly on one of the tables. To his surprise, the system identifies it as a B-rank enhancement stone. The white-haired boy cannot help but wonder what these stones are and why they ended up inside his ally's home. Before he can think further, a large bag suddenly drops from the ceiling, landing right in front of them. When he opens it, shock hits him as he sees it packed full of enhancement stones. Left without words, he questions what kind of luck could cause something like this. At that moment, a realization strikes, and his gaze slowly moves upward. What he sees leaves him stunned. The ceiling is covered with bags identical to the one that fell. The sight overwhelms him as he tries to understand how such fortune could exist. His surprise quickly turns into panic as a troubling thought crosses his mind. His eyes widen while staring at the ceiling, unable to believe how many bags hang there. Each one is filled with countless shining enhancement stones. Excitement flashes in his eyes as he understands just how valuable this hoard is. Soon after, he learns the reason behind it. Fox beast folk are naturally attracted to shiny objects like these stones. They see them as symbols of good fortune and often hide them inside their homes. The bandits must have known this tradition, which explains why they attacked the village. The truth hits him hard. This hidden treasure was the cause of the destruction. Even after others tried to comfort her, the fox girl Rhea blamed herself. Consumed by guilt, she attempted to throw all the stones into the sea. He rushed in and stopped her, grabbing her arm before she could do it. He makes it clear that she was not at fault. The blame lies with those who desired the stones. His words reach her deeply, and her eyes fill with tears as she looks at him. At that moment, a system message appears, showing her affinity with him jumping to 60. He decides the dangerous treasure must be kept under control. Rhea quietly agrees with that choice. The recent battle and this discovery harden his resolve. He comes to understand an important truth. Looking at their new resources, he knows that everyone must grow far stronger. As the sun sinks toward the horizon, he asks Rhea where the bandits' weapons were stored. Soon, the two of them arrive at the warehouse, ready to put his plan into motion. He prepares to test his newly learned weapon refinement skill using the seized equipment. Holding a dagger in one hand and an enhancement stone in the other, he steels himself. With calm focus, he activates the weapon refinement skill on the blade. A sudden burst of bright red light erupts from the warehouse, visible throughout the village. Moments later, the process ends, and the blue stone in his hand breaks apart. Rhea reacts in shock at the shattered stone, but he merely smirks, knowing it worked. A system window confirms a successful enhancement, showing a 70% success rate for C-rank items. He then turns his attention to a B-rank dagger known as Scream Spike. Its success rate is much lower, sitting at 50.5%. Gripping the dagger alongside a green stone, he prepares to enhance it for real. Outside, a rabbit girl carrying carrots notices strange flashes coming from the warehouse. Light continues to spill out, lighting up the entire village. He works through the night without pause, as red flashes keep bursting from the building. One weapon after another is refined, while the glowing light pours endlessly into the darkness. By the next morning, 2 villagers approach the warehouse out of curiosity, wondering what their village chief has been doing inside for so long. Rhea also wakes up with a wide yawn, confused about why he is still locked in the warehouse. She walks in and finds him seated on the floor, surrounded by dust from more than 2,000 shattered stones. Rhea immediately recalls that he was supposed to throw the stones into the sea, not use every single one of them. Anger flares as she realizes what he did. Furious over her destroyed lucky treasures, she grabs his head in frustration and shakes him. In the middle of it, he quickly stops her and explains that the enhancement was successful. Nearby lies a green glowing dagger, its power raised to +10. He makes it clear that it took 10 stones to fully upgrade the weapon, with every attempt succeeding. He then gestures to a massive pile of glowing weapons around him, all successfully enhanced due to their low rank. Even Tar's hammer was improved, its attack power rising by a large margin. Rhea, however, cannot see much difference at a glance. Jihan, covered in dust, suddenly sneezes hard. After wiping his nose, he complains that the only obvious change is how thick the dust is in the air. At that moment, Tor arrives. Jihan has him test the upgraded weapon. The massive warrior grips the handle of his hammer and immediately feels the altered balance. His eyes sharpen as he senses the power now flowing through it. With a loud roar, Tor lifts the hammer over his head, ready to test its force. He confirms that it feels much heavier than before, yet still easy for him to use. Though the hammer remains a C-rank item, its attack power now exceeds that of the B-rank dagger. Rhea watches with a puzzled expression, noticing that Jihan looks both pleased and troubled. His thoughts drift to his own S-rank weapon, the magic sword Hellbringer. He lets out a quiet sigh, admitting to himself that since he cannot use magic, the sword is useless for now. The scene then shifts to the human faction's kingdom, which appears calm and orderly. 2 individuals stand on a balcony, questioning why they were instructed to leave a massive pit in the ground untouched. Nearby, a blue-haired girl feels a strange and dark presence rising from the hole. Without warning, a terrifying scream echoes from deep below. Far underground, a warrior clad in golden armor strains to pull a massive sword from the earth. Dark purple energy coils around the blade as his tattooed hands grip it tightly. His eyes glow with raw focus as he channels all his strength into the effort. At last, the sword breaks free from the ground. A sudden pulse follows, leaving him uncertain about what just occurred. One of the men nearby is stunned, remembering that even Sir Ares at full strength could not draw the blade so easily. This realization makes the situation far more dangerous. The warrior, Ares, remains silent. He stares at the ominous sword now in his grasp, his expression grave. Back in the monster village, Jihan suddenly receives a system alert for the 3rd main quest. The mission demands the expansion of the monster forces. His population must grow from just over 80 to a total of 1,000. At the same time, a new party system unlocks. It allows groups of up to 4 members to form parties, granting shared experience and synergy bonuses. He sees the system as something close to an adventure mode from games and begins to plan the best possible party setup. With renewed focus, he informs his companions that they should head out and gather nearby monsters to join their side. However, the Minotaur Tar makes it clear he will not go, judging it wiser to remain behind and guard their home warren. The young leader quickly accepts that Tar is right. Taking the strongest fighters away would leave the village wide open to attack. This is not a game, and failure here carries real loss. If Warren is destroyed, the mission itself loses all meaning. He understands that full party synergy requires filling all 4 slots. At the same time, the village must stay protected. With Tar staying behind, he scans the remaining villagers, searching for possible companions. He looks over the beast folk one by one. Most of them are ordinary villagers, not battle-tested fighters. As they move about their work, their stats appear mostly the same, offering little guidance. The choice becomes harder than expected. Once his thoughts settle, the young leader approaches Tar and quietly shares his plan. The giant then gathers everyone together and announces that there are 77 beast folk present, not counting the leadership. Jihan watches with a steady expression, fully aware that he cannot choose carelessly for such a critical mission. He sits at a table beside Rhea, who struggles to stay awake, and prepares to begin what he calls an audition named Show Me the Ability 77. Tar steps forward and explains that everyone must demonstrate their usefulness. From the 77 candidates, only the most capable will earn a place in the 4-person expedition team. The Minotaur calls for the first group, numbers 1 through 4, to step up. Jihan makes it known that he is seeking someone with strong resolve, fit for exploration and carrying unique abilities. The first applicant can only shift nervously, unable to speak clearly. After hesitating, he admits he prefers to stay in Warren. The village chief immediately dismisses him without hesitation. The next group claims they need to remain behind to plant carrots together as part of village life. Jihan's patience begins to wear thin as serious candidates fail to appear. He motions Tar closer and quietly gives him new instructions. The Minotaur listens and nods, understanding at once. Turning back to the crowd, Tar announces that only those who truly want to take part should stay. After hearing this, most villagers turn around and leave. What remains is a much smaller group. Tar reports that the candidates have been narrowed down, and Jihan is clearly satisfied. With fewer people present, Tar calls forward the first applicant. A single rabbit girl steps out from the group. The tryouts take place inside a partially built structure in the village. The young rabbit girl starts to speak, her voice shaking as she attempts to introduce herself. Then, without warning, her timid behavior disappears, surprising both Jihan and Rhea. She introduces herself as Rain and claims she can manage anything, from cooking to scouting. As Jihan weighs her words, Rhea immediately raises her hand, clearly supporting the girl. Rain goes further, stating she would dedicate her life to the mission if chosen. Jihan shows no strong reaction. He quickly dismisses her for the moment and signals for the next applicant. With a simple gesture, he marks her attempt as a failure and moves on. As Rain breaks down in tears, Jihan signals Tar to bring in the next participant. He then makes it clear that the auditions have already ended. Rain was the only person who applied. The truth leaves her frozen in shock. Jihan is equally stunned, realizing that only one candidate stepped forward for such an important mission. With that, the Lizard Expedition team is officially formed, their objective set on locating and recruiting the legendary Lizard tribe. However, the moment the word lizard is mentioned, the rabbit girl stiffens. Fear washes over her as the meaning sinks in. She grows uneasy, realizing he is referring to the terrifying lizard tribe, and admits she was too nervous to fully hear the details earlier. A memory surfaces from just before the auditions began. Jihan had asked his advisors where monsters could be recruited. Tar explained that the previous village chief had been sleeping deeply since right before the battle. Jihan was shocked to learn the old leader had been unconscious for an entire month, making him impossible to consult. He had no choice but to abandon the idea of asking about nearby tribes. Tar then revealed another harsh truth. Repeated human invasions had already wiped out all nearby monster villages. Rhea suggested that small refugee settlements might still exist. Jihan immediately understood that such groups would never be enough. She agreed, stating that to face the human faction, only truly powerful monsters would matter. That was when Tar brought up a single remaining option. There was one strong tribe that had not submitted to the humans. However, he warned that they were extremely hostile and refused alliances of any kind. This formidable race was the Lizard tribe, living deep within the swampland north of Warren. The swamp was described as dark, dangerous, and avoided by most creatures. Tar confirmed that the Lizard tribe was likely the strongest race in the region. Their presence was so feared that even monsters went out of their way to avoid crossing their land. Jihan listens without interruption. He already understands the situation. From his knowledge of the game, lizardmen were monsters that appeared around Wave 30. Their power was overwhelming, not just to monsters, but to humans as well, especially at this early stage. Only 2 weeks had passed since the first wave. Recruiting monsters meant for Wave 30 would completely change everything. Returning to the present, Jihan asks Tar for the exact location of the Lizard tribe. The Minotaur hands over a rough map, explaining they must cross 3 mountains and a river to reach a hidden valley. On paper, it looks close. In reality, Ji-han is already exhausted and cannot even see the first mountain yet. As he struggles forward, Rhea happily finds a DE rank enhancement stone hidden in the grass, showing no sign of fatigue. Rain, meanwhile, carries a heavy pack, refusing to fall behind. She is determined to be useful on this journey with her village chief and his strongest warrior. A strong sense of resolve fills her as she pushes herself, eager to prove her worth. Ji-han complains about how far they still have to go. To Rain, this feels like her moment. She pulls out a book packed with scouting records, confident she can locate their position exactly. But before she can explain anything, a loud roar echoes from a nearby mountain. In that instant, she realizes she spoke too late. One of her companions urges her to move faster, saying that once they pass the first mountain, the rest of the journey will go quickly. Rain tightens her fists, reminding herself that she must prove her value, even if it requires patience. After a long trek, the group finally reaches a narrow mountain pass, only to find the road ahead completely blocked. A rock slide seals the path. The moment she sees it, Rain's eyes light up. Clearing blocked paths is one of the rabbit beast folk's strengths, and this is her chance. Confidence shows on her face as she steps forward, determined to demonstrate her worth and awaken her ability. Just as Rain ascended into rabbit form, Rhea easily destroyed the rock with a single kick. Thus, Rain's chance to prove himself was annihilated. Rhea and Ji-han advance, and noticing Rain's pause, Rhea looks back. She sees Rain transformed and questions the reason. Rain replies that it was an accident. Ji-han dismisses the issue and tells her to move on with them. The group proceeds through the newly opened path. As they walk, Rain returns to her normal form and trails behind, feeling discouraged. She starts to think her help might not matter anymore. Suddenly, her long ears twitch. She senses something the others cannot. Rain stops in place and alerts her companions that movement is nearby. Ji-han hears nothing at first. Rhea explains that Rain has sharp hearing, which is why she was assigned scouting duties. Ji-han then recalls seeing her before. As a child, she was always alert, constantly watching her surroundings. A memory flashes through his mind of a younger Rain, bloodied and running through chaos with fierce eyes. He realizes she is the same determined child from back then, grown older but still carrying that same awareness. The sound finally becomes clear. It comes from hundreds of large, clawed feet pounding the ground. The source reveals itself as a massive group of rat-like creatures. With a serious expression, Rain identifies them as the rat tribe. Ji-han connects it to the boom rats as they observe the large-scale movement from the cliff. Rain continues watching, puzzled by where such a massive group could be heading. Concern appears on her face as she traces their route. She notes that they are moving toward human lands, far outside rat territory. Looking ahead, she confirms their destination is the human faction's kingdom. Ji-han understands at once that if the rat tribe is marching toward the royal palace, something major is unfolding. Rain adds that the movement is abnormal since rat villages are scattered and rarely unite. Rhea agrees, noting that such a gathering means something is seriously wrong. With a firm expression, Ji-han decides they will follow the rat tribe. He needs to confirm what is happening. As they prepare to move, he calls on his small dragon companion, Rizzledrake, requesting help. Just as Ji-han and Rhea start to run, Rain stops them. She struggles to keep up because her bag is too heavy. Frustration hits her as she feels like a burden again. Ji-han pauses and considers a solution. He reaches toward the oversized bag on the ground and activates his storage ability. In an instant, the bag vanishes. Rain stares in shock, assuming it must be some kind of magic. A system window appears, showing the bag now stored in a large inventory slot. Ji-han decides to review the details later. For now, he makes it clear that identifying this monster wave is their highest priority. With the burden removed and the issue resolved, Rain is finally free to move properly. The three of them leap from the cliff, descending after the massive army below. The scene shifts to the human kingdom. A loud bell rings through the city, announcing the coming of war. Panic spreads across the streets as a man runs past, yelling that monsters are swarming once more. In response, armored knights quickly form ranks and begin marching through the city. Their commander, the warrior Ares, drives them forward, aware that nightfall is near. Citizens line the streets shouting for Sir Ares to defeat the monsters and keep them safe. Amid the crowd, a young girl asks her mother why monsters continue to attack. The woman explains that monsters are violent and irrational beings, and that humanity must grow stronger to survive. Close by, A blonde female knight listens silently, her expression cold and resolute. Elsewhere, the small red dragon Resildrake flaps its wings wildly, struggling to stay in the air. Watching from below, Rhea points out that they seem to be drifting the wrong way as both the leader and the dragon slowly descend. Jihan realizes he has reached his limit and may be too heavy for the small dragon to carry. Feeling apologetic, he accepts that they should descend more carefully from here on. Suddenly, Resildrake lets out a roar and loses all strength at once. Shock floods Jihan's face as they drop straight down. He screams as they fall, while his companions on the ground shout his name and rush after them. Their shadow stretches across the land below, growing larger with terrifying speed. A violent crash follows, as a massive cloud of dust and debris bursts outward on impact. At the center of a deep crater, Jihan sits clutching the dragon, checking if it is still alive. Relief washes over him when he sees Resildrake appears unharmed. He rises slowly, grateful for their endurance, but confusion sets in as he tries to figure out where they landed, assuming it must be near the kingdom. Then his eyes widen in pure horror. Something ahead steals the breath from his lungs. Rhea and Rain finally catch up, calling out to their village chief Jarun and asking if he is all right. Seeing his frozen expression, they ask what is wrong. He does not answer immediately. Jihan stands still, staring forward, unable to pull his gaze away from what lies before them. The ground ahead is covered with the bodies of the rat tribe. He confirms that every one of them is dead. The three stand in silence, overlooking a valley filled with death and ruin, trying to understand what could have caused this. As he examines the corpses, Jihan notices that most were killed by deep cuts and stab wounds from sharp weapons. His expression hardens as realization sinks in. This is the second time he has witnessed such a massacre. Once again, he finds himself standing before a field of lifeless bodies. The sight brings back a memory of the past, when he once stood before a shattered portal, surrounded by death and ruin. An image of his younger self flashes through his mind. Since arriving in this world, death has become a familiar presence. Back in the present, he finds it strange that the scene stirs no emotion in him, as if this kind of horror has always been normal. Rain covers her mouth in shock, recalling that she heard footsteps running from another direction only moments earlier. Without warning, a weak cough breaks the silence. The group quickly notices a lone survivor lying among the corpses. Jihan immediately signals Rain to bring her herbs. She responds at once as they hurry toward the injured figure. Kneeling down, she applies a healing salve to the wound. The rat creature offers a faint thanks, barely able to speak. Rain presses for an explanation, but the survivor hesitates, still shaken. Everyone gathers around him, waiting quietly as he stares at them with terror in his eyes. A memory grips the survivor. He recalls the face of a human warrior, a terrifying man marked by a single glowing blue eye. Trembling, he manages to say the word humans before his body locks up in rage and grief. Suddenly he screams in agony and lunges toward Rhea, accusing humans of slaughtering his people. Rhea stops him with ease, restraining him before he can strike. She forces him to look closely at them and settle down. The survivor turns his gaze to Jihan, confused. He notes that Jihan looks human, yet something about him feels monstrous. Rhea assures him that Jihan is not like the others. Jihan steps forward and explains that they followed the rat tribe. He asks the survivor to tell them what happened. With a serious look, he waits for the answer. The rat creature lowers his head and recalls how they were attacked by humans in armor. They were knights from the human kingdom. Hearing this, Jihan's eyes narrow as the weight of the truth settles in. A memory unfolds, showing the rat tribe facing rows of knights. The attack came without warning. The survivor remembers their leader giving an order, but his words are drowned out by screams and steel clashing. The scene turns brutal. Knights tear through the rat tribe without mercy. The rats are cut down one after another, unable to fight back. As his story ends, the survivor explains that the humans killed them all for no reason. Jihan and the others are left shaken. The vision shifts again. A rat messenger races through the darkening sky, flying with urgency. He lands roughly before the rat leader and delivers his report. 8 villages have already been wiped out by humans, his eyes burning with fury. The rat chief explodes in rage, questioning what crime his people committed to deserve this. He declares that they cannot endure it any longer. At the same time, atop the walls of the human kingdom, a commander orders the archers into position. Ares stands prepared beside the female knight. Together, they provoke the approaching monsters, daring them to come closer. The rat leader swells with rage, vowing revenge for every fallen comrade. A massive force of monsters from many tribes roars in response. United by fury and despair, the horde surges forward, charging straight toward the gates of the human fortress. Back in the present, the survivor explains that he was able to figure out the humans' motive by observing one specific man. This knight wore a ring on his lip and carried a look filled with hatred. Through him, the true reason behind the massacre becomes clear. The survivor remembers that knight walking calmly across the battlefield, paying no attention to the chaos or the dying around him. All the killing happened for one simple reason. He bent down and picked up a small purple stone from the ground. Jihan's expression hardens the moment he understands what it was, an A-rank enhancement stone. As night falls over the human kingdom, the sky sinks into a dark, heavy blue. The female knight watches the horizon and notes that the sun has fully set. This marks the start of the battle. The rat army's eyes ignite with purple light as darkness strengthens them. A system notice explains the change. All their stats increase by 30%, but their ability to think clearly disappears. From the castle walls, the human commander gives the order. Archers unleash a massive wave of arrows, blackening the sky as they fall toward the charging monsters. The arrows strike deep, piercing rat after rat. Even so, driven by rage and empowered by night, the horde keeps moving forward. The commander then shifts tactics and orders the archers to focus on the monster at the front. A warrior steps forward on the wall, raising a shining golden sword. He prepares a skill and releases a vast wall of fire. Flames surge outward, cutting off the monster's path. The rat leader stares into the fire, purple eyes glowing, showing no fear as the attack reflects back at him. Back in the present, the survivor completes his account. He explains that he used what little strength remained to confront the humans. A memory plays out of him standing weakly before the knights, begging them to stop the slaughter. He remembers clenching his teeth, forcing himself to show resistance despite pain and fear. The human knight simply turned away. He left without a second glance, abandoning the dying rats as if they were worthless. The survivor realizes that once the humans obtained what they wanted, the rest no longer mattered. Jihan listens without speaking. He feels no rage, only understanding. To him, this is simply how the world operates. His mind drifts back to his school days. He remembers being bullied, surrounded by classmates who only cared about using his father's influence for their own benefit. They pressured him, questioning why they had ever treated him kindly if he could not give them anything in return. He recalls how everyone was always measuring profit and loss, pretending not to see the truth. That lonely realization still lingers deep in his mind. From it, he learned one thing clearly. Humans will always put their own interests first, no matter the cost. On the battlefield, the human commander orders his archers to kill everything in sight as arrows continue to fall. Amid the fire and steel, one rat warrior pushes ahead with unbroken resolve. Spotting the leader of the rat tribe, the humans on the walls shout for every weapon to be aimed at him. The Rat King surges ahead, forcing smaller rats in front of him to block the endless rain of arrows. The female knight watches the advance, her face hard and focused. Arrows bury themselves into the Rat King's body, yet he ignores the wounds and pushes on toward the gate. His resolve is absolute. He intends to make the humans feel the pain and will of his tribe, even if it costs him his life. A bright blue energy begins to spark and gather around his body as he prepares a final move. He channels everything he has left, preparing to carve his tribe's suffering into the humans. The stored power is released toward the castle wall. The human commander, Ares, stares in disbelief. Understanding what is about to happen, soldiers on the wall panic, realizing the Rat King is about to self-destruct. Fear spreads as they try to pull back from the gate. The blue energy swells, seconds away from wiping out everything nearby. With his final breath, the Rat King dedicates his life to peace, a desperate sacrifice for his people. At that moment, the female knight draws her blade. She prepares her own skill and strikes. A beam of pure light erupts from her sword, colliding with the Rat King's attack. She activates her light sword dance, a flash strike meant to counter the explosion. The Rat King's eye twitches. In his final moments, he realizes with bitter clarity that his sacrifice will change nothing. A massive blast erupts at the castle gate, sending a shockwave across the battlefield. Far away, Jihan's group hears the explosion. Rhea confirms she heard it as well. Jihan explains that the Rat King was a boom rat, also known as a suicide rat, and that it just used its ultimate skill. The lone survivor watches in heavy silence, knowing the battle is over and his people are gone. Ji-han reflects on his knowledge from the game. By the 6th wave, boom rats were nothing more than minor threats to a single S-rank knight. Even if the self-destruction had fully succeeded, it would have only damaged the outer walls. The sacrifice was pointless. He wonders if the rats knew they would die and still chose to fight, simply to show the humans their pain and resolve. His teeth grind as he remembers that many of those killed were women and children who never fought at all. Ji-han recalls Tar explaining why there were no strong male beast folk left in their village. The men had marched toward the human kingdom, swearing revenge, and never came back. Their families were left behind. Only now does Ji-han fully understand. The monster attacks were not meaningless chaos. They were a direct result of human greed. A memory surfaces of the king telling him not to worry and to simply follow orders. Ji-han clenches his fist, realizing that accepting that offer would have made him part of the same problem. He lets out a slow breath, feeling calm about his choice, even though his faction has changed. He knows he is still human. Like anyone else, he moves for his own reasons. His faction's goal is the destruction of the human faction, but his true drive is simpler. He wants to protect those he cares about. Turning to his companions, he admits that he never explained the real reason for seeking out the lizard tribe. His goal is to unite them and grow stronger, not just to survive, but for something larger. He makes one thing clear: the monster waves are not random. They are the result of unchecked human slaughter. If nothing changes, the killing will only stop when no monsters remain alive. With a renewed resolve, Ji-han sets his goal. He will bring down the entire human kingdom before they can erase every monster from the land. His expression hardens with grim resolve as he accepts the role waiting for him in the coming war. He looks over his companions and makes it clear that reaching this goal will require their strength. The barren land around them reflects the recent tragedy, a harsh reminder of what is at stake. He explains that the path ahead will not be easy, but destroying the human faction is the only way they can survive. Rhea answers first, making it clear she always sensed that his hostility toward humans matched her own. She recalls the fight against the bandit leader, remembering how he refused to give in even when defeat seemed certain. Rhea follows, stating that a small village alone will never be enough. She agrees that to challenge the human faction, they must unite powerful monsters like the lizard tribe. Rain then steps forward. She speaks of Warren, where everyone watched their families die at the hands of humans. Memories of chaos and blood flood back as she recalls friends falling before her eyes. A brief vision shows a rabbit beast folk holding an injured companion as flames consume their village. Looking at the dead rat creature nearby, Rain admits they were powerless against the human attacks. Still, she recognizes that he led them to victory against the bandits and protected their home. Rhea moves closer, fixing him with a firm and serious stare. She states that if tearing down the human kingdom is the only way to bring peace, she will follow him without hesitation. Ji-han is caught off guard by her loyalty and deeply moved, quietly calling her name. Rain raises her hand next, eager to offer her support. She announces she will help as well, flexing her arm with forced confidence and a determined smile. She reveals that her parents died shielding her and her brother from humans. With sadness, she adds that her brother has since passed, joining them. Her fists tighten as she admits she once believed it was hopeless, knowing her race was seen as weak and fragile. She recalls the moment he struck down the bandit leader, a scene that filled her with a sense of justice. Seeing him fight back gave her hope, and from that moment she chose to follow him. She lets out a nervous laugh, admitting she may not be very useful, but she is determined to do her best. Ji-han thanks her simply for standing with him. Her eyes brighten with relief and joy. He reflects quietly, understanding that while their reasons differ, their purpose is the same, and that is what truly matters. Turning back to his companions, he declares that they will put an end to the cycle of human massacres and monster retaliation. Rhea watches him with steady resolve, prepared to walk this harsh road beside him. With renewed determination, Ji-han sets their final aim, to break the chain of hatred and bring peace back to the world. Even if their motivations differ, their shared goal binds them together. He reinforces that they must end the endless loop of human slaughter and the monster attacks that follow as Rhea listens, fully aware that their mission is to shatter the cycle of hatred once and for all. He completes his declaration, committing himself to bringing peace back to this world for everyone. At that moment, another voice calls out, stating a wish to stand with them. The remaining survivors of the rat tribe slowly step out from the shadows, moving through the field of bodies. They gather before the group, asking to join their side as more survivors reveal themselves one after another. Later, Jihan learns the reason behind their sudden trust. The cautious rats had been listening to the entire conversation from a distance. One especially large rat steps forward, its size catching Jihan off guard. Rhea immediately begins treating the wounded survivors, signaling the large rat covered in bandages to wait. Once the injured are cared for, they hold a quiet ceremony to burn the bodies of the fallen. At the same time, the human kingdom has already pushed back the sixth wave and begun clearing the battlefield. Knowing they are running out of time, Jihan understands they must reach the lizard folk before the kingdom grows even stronger. The next morning, sunlight rises over the land, marking the beginning of a new journey. Jihan hands the new rat tribe chief a map, instructing him to search for taro in a cave while the group is away. As the expedition departs in search of the lizard folk, the new chief watches them leave, map in hand. He looks down at the rough, childish drawing, completely confused by it. A system window appears, confirming the addition of 67 new members and updating the quest progress. After parting from the rat tribe, the group heads toward the swamp, where the lizard folk are said to live. Along the way, they stop at a river. While his companions play nearby, Jihan suddenly sinks beneath the water. He flails desperately, calling for help as the others rush in. Realizing the detour has taken its toll, they pull him out and press on his stomach until he coughs up the water he swallowed. Despite the harsh journey, they continue making progress toward their goal. Later, they encounter a wild goblin standing guard at the entrance of a cave. Jihan decides to recruit it, handing over the same crude map he previously gave the rat chief. The goblin stares at it in total confusion. A system notification appears, confirming the successful recruitment of 40 goblins into his faction. They soon encounter the Taro tribe, and Rain is surprised to recognize the muscular beastman she once knew. After another successful recruitment, 12 more members join the growing faction. Their journey is suddenly halted by the appearance of a massive, squishy blue slime. Jihan is stunned to realize it is the Slime King, the boss of the seventh wave, leading its kind straight toward the human kingdom. He runs forward and spreads his arms, desperately trying to stop them. The Slime King continues moving and absorbs Jihan into its soft body. He struggles inside before pushing himself free, warning that heading that way will lead to their deaths. It turns out the slimes had lived peacefully in a cave near the river until humans forced them out. They were simply migrating to find a new home, unaware their chosen path would lead to destruction. Jihan offers them another route to a much larger cave, showing the Slime King his simple map. After a long discussion, he finally convinces the slimes to follow him instead and join his faction. His faction count surges by 793 members, leaving him only 6 short of his goal of 1,000. As the sun sinks low, Jihan is completely worn out, complaining that he cannot take another step, and Rhea agrees with him. Just as they consider stopping altogether, Rain notices something in the distance and points it out with excitement. The group looks ahead and sees 2 massive mountain peaks outlined by the setting sun. Standing at the edge of a cliff, they realize they are finally close to the land where the lizard folk are said to live. Jihan's stomach growls loudly, and he decides they should rest for the day and eat something. Hearing his complaints about hunger, Rain treats it as her chance to be useful. She eagerly pulls out a bag, proudly revealing that she carried fresh food all the way from Warren. When she opens it and reveals a bundle of carrots, Jihan groans in disappointment at seeing the same meal again. He grumbles that he is sick of carrots and wonders if there is anything else edible in such a large forest. Rhea quietly extends her hand, offering him something she gathered nearby. He looks down and recognizes the small red fruits resting in her palm as wild berries. He eats one, and his expression changes immediately as the sweet taste spreads across his tongue. Relief and joy wash over him as he enjoys real sweetness after so long. He asks Rhea if she already knew about the berries, and she confirms it casually. Rain then suggests cooking the carrots instead of eating them raw. Excited by the idea of a warm meal, Jihan agrees without hesitation, which makes the bunny girl beam with joy. Before long, a familiar and comforting smell drifts through the air as food simmers over the fire. Rain presents a large steaming pot, clearly proud of her work. Jihan is shocked to recognize the dish as soybean paste soup, and both he and Rhea find it surprisingly delicious. Curious, he asks where she got the soybean paste. She explains that cooking is her hobby and that she made it herself. Suddenly, Jihan calls out to Rain after noticing something strange. He wonders if she just bit into a rock. She nervously explains that she sensed something moving in the darkness. At that moment, a new scent draws her attention, and she turns her head with a confused look. Two enormous ogres step out from between the trees, one of them muttering that he also bit something hard earlier. Rain finally notices the towering figures behind her and lets out a scream in terror. She shuts her eyes and braces as one massive green hand reaches down toward her. Instead of attacking, the ogre ignores her completely and bends down to pick up one of the carrots lying on the ground. Jihan watches closely and notices that both ogres are covered in scars and fresh wounds. He realizes they were drawn in by the smell of food, not looking for a fight. One of the ogres stares at the soup pot, sniffing the air with open curiosity. Trying to gather her courage, the bunny girl lightly pushes against the giant's leg to get its attention. The creature crouches low, eyes locked on the pot, while Jihan looks on in confusion. Suddenly, the ogre reaches straight into the fire and grabs the pot with its bare hands. A second later, it drops the pot and screams in pain, shaking its badly burned hands wildly. Jihan watches the scene in silence, wondering how creatures with such low intelligence manage to survive at all. At the same time, he begins to rethink his plans about recruiting ogres. As the creatures bend down and start eating the spilled soup, Jihan lets out a tired sigh, worried this unexpected stop will slow them down. Deciding to judge them properly, he activates a skill, and a purple mark glows inside his eye. The result shocks him. Both ogres are high-level B-class monsters, far more dangerous than they appear. Showing surprising strength, one ogre casually lifts the still hot pot again, ignoring the heat completely. Unnoticed by the group, a hooded figure observes everything from within the forest shadows. The ogre's sudden scream startles the watcher, causing the figure to drop a basket filled with apples. Jihan moves to speak, attempting to recruit the ogres into his expanding faction. Before he can finish, Rhea suddenly grabs his arm, her expression tense as she senses danger. In the next instant, she moves. Rhea jumps forward and blocks a sudden strike from the hidden observer. Her claws snap out as she stops the attacker's blade head-on, demanding their identity. Jihan freezes as the hood falls back, revealing long, sharp ears. He realizes at once that the attacker is a dark elf, a race he believed no longer existed. The elf raises a hand, dark energy swirling tightly around it as a twisted spell forms. With a quick motion, the stranger touches Rhea's shoulder. The magic activates instantly. Darkbind surges through her body, locking her in place. Rhea cries out in rage, struggling, but her body refuses to respond. The dark elf lunges forward, sword aimed straight at the now defenseless Jihan. He shouts Rhea's name, panic clear on his face as the blade closes in. Without hesitation, he activates his abyss slot. Purple energy wraps around his hand, forming a blade just in time. He blocks the strike, steel and energy colliding in a spray of sparks. The elf recoils slightly, stunned by the weapon. An overwhelming magical force radiates from Jihan's blade. Jihan tries to understand why they are under attack, but the elf throws the same question back at him. The response leaves him completely lost. The dark elf tightens their grip and moves again. Their weapons clash once more as the fight turns serious. Jihan struggles to keep up, the elf's skill and raw power pushing him hard. The elf blocks his strike cleanly, their swords locking together. With brute force, the attacker breaks the bind and lifts their sword again. Jihan recognizes the posture instantly and prepares himself. A wave of dark energy erupts. Dark slash tears forward, ripping through trees and ground alike. Jihan barely avoids it. The attack crashes behind him, splitting the earth open in a violent explosion. He turns just in time to see the deep lie in the ground left behind. Breathing heavily, Jihan steadies himself, weapon ready. Across from him, the dark elf stands with blood running down their face. The elf is clearly shocked he survived the attack, but quickly suppresses the reaction. Jihan again demands an explanation. This time, the elf accuses them of harming the ogres. The claim leaves Jihan stunned. He struggles to understand what the elf means. Then he remembers. The wounds covering the ogres' bodies when they first appeared. The dark elf points sharply at one ogre, demanding an answer for its burned hands and earlier scream. Jihan hurriedly tries to explain that the ogre burned itself by grabbing the hot pot. The explanation only makes things worse. The elf twists his words, fury rising, and brands him a liar. Desperate to clear up the misunderstanding, Jihan turns to the ogre and seeks confirmation. He asks the creature directly whether his group caused those injuries, and the ogre denies it. Ji-han then faces the elf again, presenting the ogre's response as proof they were innocent. The elf remains unconvinced and questions the ogre once more, asking if Ji-han's group was responsible for the harm. The elf accuses Ji-han of taking advantage of the ogre's low intelligence, refusing to accept his explanation. The clash resumes as their weapons collide again, the fight growing more intense. Ji-han moves with raw frustration, dark energy flaring around his blade as he yells, trying to force the elf to listen. The attacker's eyes widen when Ji-han swings his energy-infused weapon. The strike lands cleanly, tearing into the elf's shoulder as Ji-han shouts his innocence. A strange sensation spreads through him, and he realizes the blow was a critical hit. Blood splashes onto the grass, confirming how deep the wound is. The elf staggers back, gripping the injured shoulder and admitting the attack carried unexpected power. From the side, Rhea watches while still bound, straining against the magic holding her in place. She senses the spell weakening and knows her chance to break free is close. Before anything else can happen, the elf moves faster than sight, appearing behind Ji-han in an instant. Darkbind is cast again, freezing Ji-han where he stands. Rhea sees the spell take effect and warns him not to move, knowing he is fully exposed. The elf explains that their village follows a rule, granting offenders one chance to confess. They demand he tell the truth and seek forgiveness from the ogres for attacking them. Ji-han, filled with frustration, insists this is exactly what he has been trying to do as his eye glows red. The elf hesitates, startled by the sudden and threatening change in Ji-han. Breaking through the paralysis, Ji-han lunges forward, declaring his innocence one last time. He strikes the elf down, and one of the ogres calls out the attacker's name, Leo. Leo collapses on the ground, admitting they lowered their guard and never expected resistance. Staring up at Ji-han, Leo begins to wonder if this human might actually be stronger. Grinding his teeth, the elf is left stunned and furious by the unexpected defeat. At that moment, Rhea finally breaks free of the binding magic. She grabs the elf from behind and locks him in a chokehold, warning him not to make sudden moves. Ji-han recalls that the dark elf's binding skill has a perfect success rate on lower-grade targets. However, he also knows its effectiveness drops sharply against equal or higher grades. This is why he checked his own stats when he first entered this world. His attributes were heavily focused on critical rate and critical damage, an unusual build. More importantly, his status window showed no grade at all. He concluded that this meant his grade was at least A rank, possibly higher. That explained everything. It placed him on the same level as the A rank elf and clarified why the second binding spell failed. With the immediate danger resolved, Rain looks toward her leader. Rain looks to her leader, asking what they should do next. Rhea keeps her claws firmly pressed against Leo's neck, making sure he cannot move. Leo's thoughts drift back to the day he left his home, swearing he would return as a great warrior. Now, lying restrained, he feels nothing but failure. Ji-han steps closer and calmly signals Rhea to let the captive go. He reaches out and places a steady hand on Leo's shoulder, urging him to trust him. Meeting the elf's gaze, he extends his hand and once again makes it clear that his group did not harm the ogres. He then offers his help, promising to uncover who actually attacked Leo's people. At that moment, a system message appears, showing that their relationship has improved. Suddenly, a voice echoes from the darkness, announcing that it has finally found them. Ji-han turns his head, focusing on the unseen presence. A knight clad in dark armor steps out from the forest, his blue eyes glowing coldly. With a cruel expression, the man mocks the ogres and warns that escape is pointless. Ji-han's eyes widen in instant recognition as he notices the silver ring pierce through the man's lip. A silver ring caught the light, and the sight froze him for a brief second. Ji-hoon's thoughts spun as he recalled the man ahead, a knight with a silver ring set into his lip. It had all started over a small purple stone, yet that same knight was feared across the kingdom. He was the one who had wiped out the rat tribe. Heavy footsteps rang out, thud after thud, each step carrying weight and rank. Ji-hoon could not read the man's stats, but his instincts filled the gaps. 3 stars were etched into the knight's armor, marking him as an upper knight, A rank. There were countless A-rank knights in the realm, far too many to remember. The fact that this face felt unclear meant one thing. He was not a public hero, but a hidden blade. The knight moved closer, his face stiff and sharp as his eyes scanned Ji-hoon's group. He noted the strange mix before him, ogres, beast folk, and humans. Judging it as an odd pairing, his gaze settled on Leo. With a brief sound of interest, he studied the dark skin and pointed ears and understood at once, a dark elf. A thin laugh slipped out as he considered the value of such prey. To him, this chase had become a good find. Ji-hoon's thoughts hardened as the image of ruin matched the man before him. He wondered if this was truly the one who had torn through the rat tribe village. The knight showed no concern in confirming it, treating slaughter like a dull task. Seeing Ji-hoon speak so freely to a human stunned Leo. For a moment, he could not accept that his companion was addressing a human at all. When Ji-hoon pressed on, questioning whether this knight had also struck the ogres, the response came as loud, cruel laughter. That sound crushed any doubt Leo still held. Regret flooded him, forever mistrusting Ji-hoon. He bent his head and apologized again and again, owning his mistake. Ji-hoon stared, unsure why Leo had suddenly changed. Clenching his teeth, Leo understood that even without shared words, the truth was clear enough. In a flash, he burst forward, his speed sharp enough to shock even Ji-hoon, fast enough to claim first place in any race, if such things mattered now. Leo struck, his magic dagger flashing toward the knight. The blow was stopped cold by an armored hand. Steel took the hit, leaving the knight mostly unharmed. A crooked smile spread across the knight's face as he judged the gap in gear between them. A low laugh followed while he muttered something unclear and shifted his stance. Leo's thoughts raced. If the armor could not be broken, then flesh without cover was the answer. He charged again with full force, slicing at the side of the knight's neck. The blade cut true. Pain broke through as the knight let out a rough sound and spat curses at the lesser race. He answered at once, driving a brutal punch forward, packed with enough force to shatter bone. Leo managed to block the strike despite the pain, forcing his body to take the shock head-on. Driven by rage, he attacked again with his dagger, aiming for the knight's chest, but the armor proved far tougher than he had expected. The blade shattered in his grip, and the sudden break left him frozen for a split second. Before he could recover, the knight answered with a crushing blow that sent Leo flying into the ground. The knight exhaled hard, thinking that he had gotten carried away. He reminded himself that this target was valuable property and should not be damaged too badly. The word property made Ji-hoon frown at once. Leo's body shook as he tried to stand, gathering every bit of strength he had left. The knight stopped him by pressing a boot down on his leg, pinning him in place. With a cold smile, the idea was repeated in his mind. Leo was merchandise. The knight then looked at Ji-hoon and the others, judging them the same way, only cheaper. He did not care why they were here, but if they belonged to the kingdom, they should already know how popular monster shows had become. The term monster show echoed in Ji-hoon's thoughts, leaving him confused. The knight looked down on him, treating him as an ignorant human who did not even know such things existed. Then understanding hit him. The knight's eyes widened as he finally recognized Ji-hoon. His mood shifted at once, turning sharp and excited as he laughed, now recalling who stood before him. It was the so-called legendary knight. The hunt had turned far better than expected. Rare ogres, a young dark elf, and even a human tritar with a royal bounty tied to his name. Filled with pride, the knight decided that he would personally take them all back to the kingdom. Without delay, he charged straight at Ji-hoon, aiming to end it quickly. Ji-hoon tightened his grip on his sword and prepared himself. As the knight closed the distance, Ji-hoon struck first, but the attack was stopped by a bare hand. The knight noted with interest that the sword itself looked valuable too. Ji-hoon questioned whether all of this was truly ordered by the king. The answer came without warmth, making it clear that the king's will was law. Ji-hoon thought bitterly that acting openly cruel must make things easier, leaving no room for guilt. The knight took that thought with a grin, seeing it as fitting for a traitor. Nearby, Rizzle lay fast asleep, calm and untouched by the violence around him. Without warning, Rhea rushed forward and slashed the knight's arm with her sharp nails, drawing blood. Watching this, Leo's thoughts drifted to party rules, how experience was shared but depended on effort. He wished even now that more of it could flow to Rhea. Ji-hoon turned his focus to Rizzle, urging him to be ready if things went wrong. The only answer was a loud roar that shook the air itself. The knight mocked them as uncivilized beings, though he admitted they made good entertainment. Muttering under his breath, he called on an earth-based power. The ground responded at once. Stones rose and gathered around his hand, sealing it inside thick, hardened rock. Ji-hoon's suspicion was confirmed. This was an earth attribute skill. With his arm now wrapped in solid stone, the knight steadied himself and prepared to strike again. He roared in rage over the damage done to his armor, fuming about its cost and how it had been scratched at all. Then he swung with brutal force, unleashing a fist made of earth that slammed toward Ji-hoon and Rhea, the impact rattling the ground beneath them. Ji-hoon focused as the A-rank knight, Lockhand, pressed the attack. He followed every motion, sensing the raw strength behind the strike while also noticing its flaw. The size of that stone-covered weapon made it slow. Against the awakened Rhea, it was a bad pairing. Even so, Ji-hoon understood that letting the fight drag on would only make things worse for them. At that moment, Rhea dropped from the top of a tree, her body aimed straight at the knight. Lockhand met her without hesitation, lifting his massive rock arm and trying to crush her mid-air. Rhea slipped past the blow, landing on a nearby beam and twisting her body. Her claws flashed, ripping through his arm in a sudden counter. Lockhand froze, stunned, as blood spilled from the torn flesh. Nearby, Leo watched her rapid movements and could not hide his shock. In his mind, he marveled at how this beast folk moved faster than a cheetah. Rain turned toward Leo and offered to treat his wounds. Leo stared at her, caught off guard by the offer. She answered his look with an awkward smile, knowing healing was the only thing she could give. Without delay, she began to restore him, her hands giving off a faint glow as she focused on his injuries. On the other side, Rhea did not slow down. In just a few seconds, she struck again and again, her claws cutting through Lockhand with blinding speed. Deep gashes spread across the knight's hands, blood running down his arms. Even the orc nearby stood frozen, unable to accept how fast she was moving. Ji-hoon kept his eyes on Rhea, breaking down every step of her fight with the A-rank knight Lockhand. He saw clearly why a B-rank like her could hold her ground. The gap in speed was overwhelming. She was fighting on skill alone. Still, Ji-hoon knew that every transformation had a time limit. Without warning, Lockhand swung his stone arm wide and threw a heavy punch. The blow landed cleanly, smashing into Rhea with crushing force. Rain's cry cut through the noise as panic took hold. Rhea was hurled into a tree, crashing hard and letting out a low groan. Ji-hoon's face hardened as the thought crossed his mind that this might be the end. He shifted his footing, steadying himself. The angle of his next strike had to be exact. If he misjudged it, Rhea would be caught in it as well. He started to prepare Rizzle for an attack. Ji-hoon knew it was a waste to use Rizzle's wide-range strike on a single enemy, but that concern meant nothing next to Rhea's life. They had already earned enough battle experience by facing an A-rank knight. Just as he was about to move, Ji-hoon was stunned to see Leo charge forward again, gripping his broken sword as he rushed back toward Lockhand. Panic surged through Ji-hoon, unable to understand why Leo would throw himself in again. Lockhand fixed his glare on Leo, ordering him aside and warning that he would tear everything apart, valuable gear included, if it meant forcing him to kneel. Leo's eyes hardened. He refused to retreat, ready to give up his life because losing was not an option he could accept. He rushed in and struck, but the attack had no effect. Lockhand's low voice carried scorn as he dismissed the rumors about dark elves being dangerous due to debuff magic, calling it meaningless talk. He seized Leo and slammed him into the ground. His cruelty showed as he noted that Leo's poor intellect was helping calm his own anger. Leo was told not to fear for his life, since it still held value, but beasts that failed to know their place had to be beaten. Watching from afar, Ji-hoon questioned why the knight went this far. The answer came without warmth. Lockhand believed he was being merciful, but Leo was too ignorant to grasp it. In his view, Leo was not at fault. He was simply born into a savage, lesser race that howled instead of speaking. Leo clenched his teeth as memories flooded back. In his childhood, his strength had always been lacking. His father had tried to comfort him, telling him not to worry, promising that his magic would grow with time. Yet as the years passed, nothing changed. Whispers followed him everywhere, saying the chief's son had less magic than a child. People questioned how someone like him could be the heir of the tribe. Unable to endure the shame, Leo had left his home. As he walked away, he swore he would return stronger and walk the same path as his father. Back in the present, regret shook him. Thoughts of his father filled his mind, and he apologized in silence, crushed by the feeling that he had failed. Ji-hoon called out to him and threw his sword in his direction, urging him to take it. Leo caught the blade, and the moment his hand closed around the hilt, a massive flow of energy surged through him. Power flooded his body, and he realized that magic was pouring out of him without restraint. With that level of magic flowing through him, He was finally able to fight back. Leo rushed in, swinging the sword and driving it straight into Lockhand's chest. The knight did not move, not even a scratch appearing. Lockhand burst into loud laughter, treating the attack as nothing more than a joke. Ji-hoon watched Leo closely, breaking down the motion of the strike, noting the diagonal path from the upper right down to the lower left. Then Leo let out a roar as the sword released an even greater surge of power. Energy poured out without restraint. He attacked again, using everything left in his body. Light exploded from the blade, spreading through the forest and lighting up everything around them. The force behind it stunned everyone who witnessed it. Lockhand was hit head-on and hurled far away as the ground split apart beneath him. His armor, clothes, and all his gear shattered and were wiped out completely. Ji-hoon stared, stunned, realizing that Leo's strength was several times greater than before. Leo looked down at his own hands, unable to accept that he had released such power. His strength ran out at once, and he dropped to the ground, eyes fixed on the sword, as he wondered what kind of weapon it really was. Ji-hoon immediately turned his attention to Rain, urging her to treat Leo and Rhea at once. Rain answered without delay, her resolve clear as she moved to help. Not far away, Lockhand lay on the ground, barely alive, yet still able to curse, raging that such lesser races dared to stand against him. Ji-hoon stepped forward and threw his sword toward the fallen knight, forcing his focus away from empty insults and toward a different kind of talk. Ji-hoon's gaze sharpened as he showed calm interest in the kingdom itself. He pressed the blade tight against Lockhand's neck, making the threat clear without words. From that moment on, any lie or refusal would carry a price. Ji-hoon began questioning him at once, first demanding to know the number of soldiers in the kingdom. Lockhand answered that when archers and foot soldiers were counted together, the total exceeded 3,000. Ji-hoon followed up by asking about soldiers like Lockhand who operated outside the royal palace. Lockhand admitted he did not know how many subjugation forces existed. Ji-hoon pressed further, questioning what those forces were meant to do. Lockhand's eyes darkened as old memories surfaced. The scene shifted to the past, to a moment when he had been summoned by the ruler himself. Back then, he had stood before the king, addressed as Senior Knight Lockhand of the Royal Guard Oth Division. Lockhand had answered the summons with respect, and the ruler had stated the need for stronger arms. He had been ordered to wipe out everything surrounding the kingdom and recover whatever was required. The scene returned to the present as Lockhand continued explaining to Ji-hoon. The subjugation forces were roaming in search of enhancement stones to strengthen weapons and caves rich in iron ore, which was used to reinforce the city walls. Ji-hoon reflected that his question might have been too simple. From what he knew of knight defense systems, expeditions existed for gathering items like enhancement stones and grade stones. It seemed likely that the subjugation forces were nothing more than groups formed for those same purposes. He moved on to his next concern and asked about the kingdom's two elite knights, Ares and Lib. Lockhand confirmed at once that he knew them. Ji-hoon pressed further, asking about their level, or more precisely, how many skills they could use, since early progression could be judged by skill count. Lockhand stated that both Ares and Lib were capable of using 2 skills each. Ji-hoon processed the answer and concluded that neither had reached level 20 yet. Lockhand then let out a mocking laugh, pointing out that Ji-hoon's focus on troop numbers and elite knights made it seem as if he were setting his sights on the kingdom itself. Ji-hoon showed no hesitation, treating that idea as irrelevant. Lockhand laughed even harder, ridiculing the thought that such limited information could be enough. He scoffed that breaking through walls guarded by elite knights would never be easy. Then he dropped a detail Ji-hoon had missed. There were not only 2 elite knights. Ji-hoon froze, instantly understanding the weight of that statement. He recalled how, in knight defense, the maximum number of elite knights allowed before the game ended was 7. Choosing which S-rank knight to summon during the first wave often decided whether the run would succeed. He remembered the structure clearly, the steady climb from wave 1 up to wave 15. Yet now, in this early stage, barely past wave 6, the kingdom already possessed more than 2 elite knights. Lockhand revealed their names with calm certainty. Artillerist Akur and Fanatic Archeon. That made 4 elite knights already known. Ji-hoon found himself unable to speak, his thoughts racing as the gap between the game and reality became clear. Unlike a game, this world did not reset. Soldiers could be wounded for real, and walls could truly be broken. Repairing defenses and healing the injured would demand vast time and effort, far beyond simple numbers on a screen. And yet, The reason wars could happen so often became painfully clear in Ji-hoon's mind. The scene shifted to the aftermath of Akor's healing. She was shown restoring everything around her, fixing shattered ground and broken structures with exact control. Her power returned all damage to its original state, radiant energy spreading across the battlefield. Ji-hoon watched in shock as the truth settled in. It was because of the healing artillerist Akor. His thoughts raced further as he accepted that even the sage Archeon existed in this world. There were already 4 S-rank knights, and the fear grew that there might be more. The situation felt absurd, a reality so extreme it was hard to grasp. From the kingdom's side, this world was set to an easy mode. From Ji-hoon's side, trying to break through such power meant facing an ultra-hell mode. Lakhan noticed Ji-hoon's frozen state and reacted with open mockery. Ji-hoon steadied himself, deciding there was one final thing he needed to know. A sharp realization struck him. There had never been legendary knights in the game. The only player had been him. He was an existence that did not belong to the system at all. He sought to understand what a legendary knight truly was, and how Lakhan had summoned such a being. Before that thought could fully form, a sudden rain of arrows poured down toward him. Panic spread as Rain reacted to the attack, realizing they had been surrounded by a large force of humans. Leo stared in disbelief, wondering if Lakhan had reinforcements. From the forest emerged the Royal Guard Oath Division. Their armor gleamed as they raised their weapons, all aimed at Ji-hoon. They ordered him away from Sir Lakhan. Despite his burned and broken state, Lakhan formed a cruel smile and activated his skill. Stone Earth regeneration took effect, his body slowly repairing itself. He reaffirmed himself as a knight of the Great Kingdom, making it clear he would not give up information easily. Anyone who learned the kingdom's secrets would die there, and Ji-hoon's corpse would be personally delivered back. Ji-hoon remained calm. He already knew about the kingdom's movements through the Rat tribe. Around 100 soldiers had attacked their village. If their commander failed to return soon, those same soldiers would head this way searching for him. Ji-hoon had been waiting for that outcome as well. Lakhan reacted with anger, dismissing it as a lie. Ji-hoon continued without emotion, pointing out that if Lakhan truly was their commander, then every one of those soldiers was weaker than him. Lakhan demanded how Ji-hoon could be so sure. Ji-hoon answered with nothing more than a confident smirk, knowing the reason was simple. It was all based on experience. Lakhan's face twisted in disbelief as the meaning of the word experience sank in. Without giving him another second, Ji-hoon turned his focus to Roselle, signaling that it was time to move. The creature answered with a deep roar as Roselle Drac fully awakened its strength. Lakhan reacted with mocking laughter, dismissing the idea that such a small monster could pose any threat. Ji-hoon pushed Roselle forward, ordering it to seize them all. Roselle opened its jaws wide and released its dragon breath. Fire burst out in a violent wave, swallowing the Royal Guards whole. A system window appeared at once, flashing new alerts. Party synergy effect activated. Magic-type monsters' attack power increased by 20%. Even while burning, Lakhan showed disbelief, unable to accept what was happening. Rain, Leo, Rhea, and the orcs stood frozen, eyes wide, watching Roselle's overwhelming power erase everything in its path. After a short while, the flames died down. Roselle's strength drained away as exhaustion set in. Another system notice appeared. Mana depletion penalty. Fatigue increased. Ji-hoon walked up to the worn-out creature and patted its head in approval. Roselle managed a weak smile, breathing hard but clearly satisfied. Ji-hoon's thoughts turned inward as he reviewed the fight. His level had risen at a shocking pace. Still, the total experience felt lower than expected for the number of enemies defeated. He guessed most of them had been low-ranked knights. Even so, he judged the result as a solid gain. As he looked around, something unsettling caught his eye. The burned royal guards began to change. Their bodies hardened, turning stiff and clear until they became crystal stones. Ji-hoon picked one up and studied it closely. He noted that enhancement stones did not break, even under a dragon's breath. With that confirmed, he ordered everyone to collect the spoils. Rhea and Rain agreed at once and rushed off to gather everything they could find. While they worked, Ji-hoon opened the system window and checked the stats of Roselle, Rhea, and Rain. He confirmed that experience within a party was shared, but divided based on contribution. Rain, who had only healed during the fight, had still gained 17 levels. Rhea and Roselle, who fought directly, had risen by 10 and 7 levels. From this, Ji-hoon concluded that rank played a role in experience gain. He glanced over at Rhea, Rain, and Roselle, all busy picking up enhancement stones. Even with the unclear balance of experience sharing, he felt relieved. Roselle had reached level 10. Its MP had increased sharply, and a new skill had appeared. Ji-hoon froze when he recognized it. It was a skill he never expected Roselle to have. The focus shifted back to Ji-hoon. His thoughts turned to Leo, and he felt that something between them was still unresolved. The internal counter in his view read 64%. He questioned why Leo had fought with such desperation, even putting his own life at risk to protect the ogres and shield Rhea. Leo stayed silent, weighed down by regret. Inside, he apologized to Ji-hoon for everything that had happened. He decided to escort the lost ogres to the sea, and then leave on his own. As he walked, weakness lingered in his body. He remembered the promise he had once made, that he would return stronger and follow his father's path. No matter how hard he trained, his magic power had never grown. Yet through the recent battle, he felt that he had finally found a possible way forward. As Leo prepared to depart, Ji-hoon observed him closely. He noted that Leo's magic power was abnormally low, barely 1/10 of what a normal dark elf possessed, perhaps even less. Ji-hoon understood that 2 restraints and a single slash were enough to drain Leo completely. Leo was taken aback, wondering how Ji-hoon could know such details when he was not even a dark elf. Ji-hoon explained it inwardly as a special ability unique to himself. Leo accepted the explanation more easily than expected, though embarrassment crept in, as if his weakness had been fully exposed. Ji-hoon then brought up the moment when Leo had gripped the sword and felt his magic surge. He reasoned that the blade was no ordinary weapon, but a magic sword capable of supplying magic power and boosting magical attacks. Leo understood at once that it was a rare magical weapon, and admitted he had never seen one of such quality. Ji-hoon chose to give the sword to Leo. Leo questioned the intent, and Ji-hoon's purpose was clear. He wanted Leo to wield it and fight at his side. Leo recalled that dark elves did not normally join forces with other races. Still, Ji-hoon pressed the point that Leo wished to grow stronger. Ji-hoon understood Leo's condition well. His magic power was lacking, but his physical ability was far beyond that of other dark elves. The real weaknesses were his low magic reserves and poor magic attack strength. Leo reluctantly admitted that this judgment was correct. Among dark elves, those with weak magic were treated as worthless. That was the reason Leo had been traveling in search of a way to increase his magic power. Ji-hoon then took an enhancement stone and rubbed it against the sword, confident that the issue could be fixed. He believed Leo's physical talent was unmatched among his kind and offered to help him build the magic power he lacked. Ji-hoon was capable of continuously increasing the weapon's magical output. He pulled out a B-rank enhancement stone and began the enhancement process. Leo watched in disbelief as the attempt failed. The magic power did not rise at all. Ji-hoon tried once more. From afar, Rain noticed the flashes coming from the enhancement stones and felt puzzled by what she was seeing. At last, the sword's magic power rose. Ji-hoon named the blade Scream Spike and noted that it had reached an impressive +11 enhancement. He showed that he could continue enhancing weapons and made it clear that he planned to push Leo's magic power to its limit. Leo thought it over carefully. If this method truly allowed him to grow stronger, then it was not submission, but a reasonable deal. After some hesitation, Leo agreed to join for 10 years. Nothing beyond that, just temporarily. Ji-hoon accepted, though something felt strange to him, since 10 years hardly sounded short at all. Leo wondered if there was an issue, while Ji-hoon insisted that 10 years was sufficient. Ji-hoon introduced himself as Kim Ji-hoon, and Leo gave his name as Leonard Bell Leon. At that moment, Rhea, Rain, and Rizzle returned carrying a huge number of enhancement stones. Ji-hoon was caught off guard by how many there were. Rhea cheerfully showed them off, calling them pretty, and mentioned that something odd had happened nearby. Ji-hoon inspected the stones and quickly sensed that something was not normal. Leo examined them as well, and excitement spread as everyone realized the value of what they had found. Ji-hoon later explained that they ate together and talked for a long time. The discussion centered on the cruel actions of humans and the recent attacks they had faced. He brought up the enhancement stones carried by the knights, pointing out that while their number, around 220, was smaller than the stash found at Rhea's home, many of them were still high grade. Among those stones, there was one unexpected and extremely valuable piece. Ji-hoon instructed Rain to use it, and she followed his guidance. As she did, a red aura spread out from her body. The system window appeared, confirming that the D-grade gradestone had reached an 85% chance of grade growth and that the attempt had succeeded. Her level was adjusted due to experience redistribution, dropping from 26 to 21. Ji-hoon checked the result and asked about her condition. Rain felt a little dizzy, but at the same time, she sensed a strong surge of power inside her. Ji-hoon encouraged her to keep going and pushed her to try again. Rain reacted with excitement and continued repeating the process over and over until morning finally arrived. The next day, Ji-hoon stated that they headed toward the swamp where the lizard folk lived. He explained that ogres favored places close to water, and that Leo Arbel Lion had been guiding the lost ogres along rivers toward the sea. Because of this, Ji-hoon convinced the lizard folk to gather and move with them to Warren, since Warren also had access to the ocean. The group kept moving together along the path. As the journey stretched on, Leo wondered if Ji-hoon was already growing tired. Ji-hoon felt annoyed and pointed out that they had only been walking for a few days, and that the others were the strange ones for thinking it was long. Leo reacted with confusion, which led Ji-hoon to complain that Leo's name was far too long and awkward to say. Leo allowed him to choose any name that felt easier. Ji-hoon settled on Bell, a choice that caught Leo off guard by how much it shortened his full name. Without warning, Rain pointed ahead, signaling something in the distance that might be their destination. She felt an uneasy presence coming from that direction. Leo shared his concern, admitting that gathering the lizard folk was a smart move, but also stressing that they were a race as strong as dark elves. Because of that strength, they would never easily submit to anyone. Ji-hoon answered calmly, drawing a quiet comparison to Leo's own situation and making it clear the matter was his to handle. As he showed a faint, confident smile, something felt wrong. A strange presence revealed itself, and from the side, the leg of a creature came into view, as if it had been watching them the entire time. The group continued forward and entered a shallow pool. The ogres sank the moment they stepped in. Both struggled at once, sinking deeper and falling into trouble, while Rhea walked across the water's surface with ease, clearly enjoying herself. Leo noticed the ogres drifting farther away, panic spreading as they sank, and reacted in shock at how far they had already gone. As the ogres continued to sink, Leo stopped them. He then stepped onto the water himself and moved forward to help, while Ji-hoon watched with growing tension. At that moment, someone approached Ji-hoon and calmly explained the situation. Ogres were usually 5 to 6 meters tall and weighed several dozen tons, making swamp crossings nearly impossible for such slow and heavy bodies. Ji-hoon turned toward the speaker and recognized the figure as a lizard folk. The newcomer identified himself as Linak. Behind them, the ogres were still struggling in the water. Rhea looked at Linak and confirmed that he was indeed lizard folk. Linak informed them that beyond the swamp lay a lizard folk settlement. Ji-hoon stated that meeting the lizard folk was the reason they had come this far. Linak warned them that the lizard folk did not welcome other races stepping into their land and assumed they already understood that risk. Ji-hoon answered that anything of value was always found near danger and noted that Linak seemed unusually confident about something. Linak asked for the reason they wanted to meet the lizard folk, and Ji-hoon revealed their goal of borrowing the lizard folk's strength to strike the kingdom. Linak laughed at that and explained that after leaving his village, he had wandered for many years and seen firsthand the cruelty of humans. Because of that, he understood why such different races, humans, beast folk, dark elves, and ogres, had gathered for the same cause. Hearing this, Leo let out a quiet breath of relief. At that moment, Razel floated over and settled on Ji-hoon's head. Linak wondered who the small figure was, and Ji-hoon introduced the child as his friend, Razeldrak. Razel yawned again, and Ji-hoon noted that the child slept often. Linak accepted him as a friend and explained that convincing the chieftain would not be easy, since it was the chieftain's birthday. He added that the chieftain was young and cautious, and that they would need to show enough power to succeed. He wished them luck with their plan, and said he would take care of the ogres in the meantime. Leo hesitated, feeling uneasy, but Ji-hoon insisted and respectfully asked Linak for help, even calling him an old man. Leo questioned how Ji-hoon could trust someone so quickly, but Ji-hoon urged him to follow and called him Bell. Leo objected, pointing out that he had never met Linak before and that such trust felt reckless. Ji-hoon reassured him and asked him to believe, explaining inwardly that the old man had a high level of affinity with him. Leo glanced at Rayan and wondered if Ji-hoon had once again seen through everything with that strange ability. Rayan hesitantly agreed. Linux then called the ogres over and told them to come with him. At first, the ogres refused, insisting they could not follow just anyone. Linux understood their caution and offered them food instead. The ogres quickly softened, admitted they were hungry, and agreed to follow him. The group moved toward Mudrak village. Linux mentioned that Mudrak would be lively that day, though the thick fog made it hard to see much. Ji-hoon asked how much farther they had to go. Before long, they arrived at the lizard folk village of Mudrak. Ji-hoon noted that he had never imagined a village could exist deep inside the swamp. Rayan pointed out that perhaps because it was the chieftain's birthday, no one seemed to be around. Ji-hoon decided they should head inside anyway. Rayan worried about entering without permission, but Ji-hoon pointed out that waiting forever was pointless, and that meeting the chieftain was necessary. Leo reflected that they had followed Linak only because they trusted Ji-hoon and believed there had to be a way to persuade the village. Rhea stated with confidence that Ji-hoon always did what he promised and made it clear that she believed in him completely. Leo asked whether she liked Ji-hoon, and Rhea flushed at once, stumbling over her denial and embarrassment while questioning why such a thing would even be asked. Before the moment could stretch further, Ji-hoon suddenly stopped, sensing something unusual. Rhea asked what he had heard, and Rain confirmed that she had begun to notice it as well. Ji-hoon focused and picked out the sound clearly. It was a heavy pounding, coming from a specific direction. He pointed toward it, signaling the source. Rhea warned him to stay alert, but before he could respond, a lizard folk soldier launched an attack straight at him. Ji-hoon reacted instantly, dodging the strike and recognizing the attackers at once. Leo intercepted another soldier's blow, while Rhea leapt forward, striking back and forcing the soldiers away from Ji-hoon. She moved in to attack again, but Ji-hoon stopped her, telling her to wait. Before she could pull back, a soldier struck her hand, leaving her injured. Ji-hoon quickly addressed the soldiers, making it clear they had not come to fight, only to meet the chieftain. One soldier noticed that a human was speaking their language and decided that this alone marked him not as a guest, but as a criminal. The soldiers judged the group as intruders rather than visitors. Chains were placed on all of them, and they were dragged away. As they were taken, Ji-hoon noted inwardly that even the weakest soldier among them was far beyond their level. That alone told him they had reached the right place. He also realized that the pounding sound he had sensed came from here. Leo grew annoyed and remarked that the lizard folk were throwing an extremely noisy birthday celebration. A soldier snapped at them to stop talking and move faster. They were led into an arena. Inside, a kingdom knight was already locked in combat with a lizard folk warrior. In one clean motion, the lizard folk cut the knight's throat. Ji-hoon stared at the scene, stunned, trying to understand why a kingdom knight was here at all. The lizard folk warrior who delivered the killing blow bowed deeply before Lyrak and offered birthday wishes. Lord Lyrak continued eating his fish, calmly observing that the warrior's edge had grown sharper. He praised the fight as a fine, bloody display worthy of a true lizard folk. Another lizard folk called out for the next match to begin. A warrior stepped up to the caged kingdom knights and challenged any of them willing to fight to come forward. The knights, unable to understand his words, shouted in anger, telling him to go away while shaking in fear. Among them, a female soldier trembled uncontrollably. At that moment, the lizard folk soldiers who had captured Ji-hoon's group arrived before Lyrak and announced that they had apprehended intruders. Lyrak's attendant inspected the bound group and demanded an explanation, pointing out that Mudrak lay deep within the swamp, that no one came there without reason, and that their tribe did not welcome outsiders. He pressed them again, insisting on knowing their purpose. Ji-hoon assessed the soldiers watching from the stands. Their levels ranged from 30 to the mid-30s, with ranks spanning from C to A, and their combined force was far greater than he had expected. Yet the real shock came from the lizard folk chieftain himself. Ji-hoon realized that the one seated before them was S rank, level 36. Lyrak's face hardened as he wiped blood from himself and demanded to know why they had entered Mudrak. Ji-hoon answered plainly that they needed the strength of the lizard folk. Lyrak burst out laughing and the entire tribe followed his lead. Rhea bristled in anger, demanding to know what was so amusing, while Rain panicked and tried to stop her. Leo urged Rhea to stay calm, reminding her that this was only the beginning. Rhea questioned what kind of beginning this was, and Leo clarified that it was a negotiation where their lives were on the line. Lyrak kept laughing, clearly entertained by Ji-hoon's claim that he needed power, and pressed him to see if that was all he had to say. Ji-hoon lowered his head, deciding inwardly that they had to move boldly. Once they bowed, they would never stand as equals again. This world followed the same rules as the game, and that meant Ji-hoon had already met the basic conditions needed to lead the lizard folk. Ji-hoon then declared that all lizard folk would fall under him. At once, a soldier thrust a spear to Ji-hoon's throat, calling him an insolent fool for daring to insult the chieftain and the tribe. Rain froze at the sight, nearly losing consciousness, while Rhea stared in disbelief. Leo understood then that Ji-hoon was using the method he had hinted at earlier. A soldier insisted there was nothing more to hear, and suggested ending their lives on the spot. Ji-hoon and Lirak locked eyes, cold and unmoving. After a moment, Lirak ordered the soldiers to lower their weapons. He stated that his decision was the decision of all lizard folk, and whatever choice he made, the tribe would follow. Ji-hoon replied that he held power, then turned the question back on the chieftain. If every lizard folk followed Lirak, then whom did Lirak himself follow? A soldier rushed forward in rage, accusing Ji-hoon of arrogance. Ji-hoon remained calm and called out to Rizeldrak. Lirak reacted with confusion at the name. Ji-hoon repeated it, pointing out the being floating above his head as Rizeldrak. He explained that the lizard folk worshipped dragons, the very beings they revered. Lirak hesitated, disbelief crossing his face, and questioned whether it truly was a dragon. Leo turned toward Rhea in shock, repeating the word dragon in his mind. He recalled the legendary dragon race and wondered if Rizeldrak belonged to it. Rhea reminded him that he had already witnessed that massive attack earlier and still failed to understand what he was seeing. Leo admitted that the earlier attack had been overwhelming, but he also recalled that the dragon race had disappeared more than 100 years ago. From his parents' stories, dragons were described as massive beings with huge wings, capable of wiping out entire villages with a single breath. Because of that image, he could not accept that the small creature floating before him was truly a dragon. Lirak acknowledged that his people worshipped dragons and followed their will as absolute law. Even so, he insisted that the being above Ji-hoon was not a dragon. The lizard folk soldiers erupted in anger, shouting that the intruders were mocking the dragon race. They demanded that the outsiders be executed at once. One soldier drove a spear close to Ji-hoon's neck and looked to the chieftain for a final call. Ji-hoon assessed the situation in silence. He questioned how the lizard folk chieftain could fail to recognize a dragon at all, wondering whether Lirak truly did not know, or if he was only pretending not to. Lirak suddenly paused, then announced that a more entertaining idea had come to him. He mentioned that there were still 4 prisoners awaiting execution. Rain echoed the words in shock, understanding what death row prisoners meant. The soldiers ordered the remaining kingdom knights to step forward. Lirak explained that not long ago, those same knights had broken into Mudrak, stolen their treasure, and slaughtered a young warrior without mercy. He declared that a fight would decide their fate, and whoever survived would be spared. The surviving kingdom knights moved forward to face Ji-hoon's group. Leon protested, questioning why they were being forced into battle, but a soldier shut him down, reminding him that intruders had no right to refuse. Ji-hoon accepted the situation, deciding that it no longer mattered whether the lizard folk believed the truth or not. Leon begged Ji-hoon to say something. Ji-hoon chose his response carefully. He would prove it himself by showing them the true power of a dragon. Humans and beast folk stood facing each other inside the arena, the air thick and tense, like the quiet pause before a tournament fight that everyone knew would turn violent. Among the humans, a yellow-haired knight stared at the beast folk with smug confidence, talking as if victory would really spare his life. Beside him, a heavily armored knight thought grimly about his situation. He had been meant to die, yet now there was a slim chance to survive, as if fate had flipped into a twisted gamble with slightly better odds. Their meaningless chatter grated on their female teammate, whose irritation showed clearly as her patience with their arrogance ran thin. The armored knight then sized up the beast folk with cold judgment, dismissing everyone except the dark elf as weak, delivering his opinion like an unwanted ranking announcement. The yellow-haired knight stepped forward eagerly, claiming the first fight for himself and calling for an opponent. He provoked them openly, throwing insults and labeling the beast folk as savages. Rhea reacted at once, anger flashing across her face as she bristled at his tone and mocking grin. Nearby, Leon radiated killing intent, already imagining the end of all of them, skipping ahead in his mind as if this were the final battle. At that moment, the lizard folk duel instructor addressed everyone and laid out the rules. The fight would be one-on-one, and the loser would die immediately. The arena was no longer a stage, but a place with no return. The yellow-haired knight turned to Ji-hoon and asked for the rules to be explained. Ji-hoon conveyed them plainly. After hearing them, the knight casually invited anyone to step forward, treating the duel like a light spar instead of an execution. Ji-hoon watched the knights closely and began judging them by their star count. There were 3 A-rank knights present. The one standing at the front, however, was only mid-B rank. Ji-hoon instantly marked him as the weakest one, the kind of enemy that pretended to be dangerous while clearly not measuring up. With that in mind, he turned to Rain and suggested that she take the fight. Rain froze, caught off guard, doubt rising as she questioned herself. Ji-hoon reassured her, certain that she had grown strong enough and needed to trust that strength. Rain thought back to the power she had received from the chieftain. She realized that something within her had changed since that day. She could no longer stay in the back forever, carrying supplies while others bled and fought. With resolve settling in, Rain stepped forward. If she was going to fight someday anyway, then she would face it now. As the duel was decided, everyone else cleared the arena. Only the 2 fighters remained, and the space suddenly felt wider, emptier, and far more dangerous. Ji-hoon glanced toward Liarch, recalling the earlier words about how the lizard folk worshipped dragons and followed their chosen will as absolute law. Back in the present, Ji-hoon looked at Liarch again and reflected that he already held 2 solid proofs that Rizal was a dragon. He knew he could expose the truth right away. Still, with Rain's recent rise in rank, this duel was a rare chance for real combat experience, something that could not be skipped or fast-forwarded. Inside the arena, the yellow-haired knight stared at Rain in disbelief, clearly shocked that she was the one facing him. Rain stood there nervously, her fear obvious in her stiff posture. The knight judged her at once, recognizing her as a rabbit beast folk, what he believed to be the weakest race of all. He thought that even if he won and lived, there would be no honor in defeating someone like her. Rain trembled as she looked at his harsh face, fear almost visible through her ears. Then the duel began. The yellow-haired knight activated his power, deciding that a single strike would be enough, since anything more would stain his family's name. He stepped forward and unleashed his Thunder God sword style, releasing a powerful lightning slash aimed straight at Rain. A sharp blast tore through the arena, smoke and shockwaves spreading outward. Rain felt alarm rise in her chest, but Ji-hoon remained completely calm, watching as if this were a scene whose ending he already knew. He thought that the old D-rank Rain would have been frozen in terror by such an attack. Now, however, Rain stood in a different place altogether. As the smoke cleared, Rain suddenly turned and ran, fleeing across the arena in panic and signaling surrender. She believed that continuing meant certain death, and was convinced that defeating someone that strong was impossible. This reaction caught Ji-hoon slightly off guard. The yellow-haired knight, however, was furious. Being shamed like this enraged him. He chased after her, sword raised, moving in to strike again. Rain felt fear overwhelm her as the threat closed in, her body shaking as danger pressed closer. At that critical instant, Ji-hoon's earlier words surfaced in her mind, reminding her that she had grown stronger and needed to trust that strength. Rain realized that if all she ever did was run, nothing would change. With that thought, she jumped and dodged the knight's attack with unexpected speed. Flames suddenly burst from her body, shocking everyone watching. Ji-hoon reacted in disbelief, understanding at once that this had to be Rain's new skill. Wrapped in fire, Rain swung her arm and struck the knight across the face with a burning slap. The impact sent him flying backward, flames trailing as he crashed hard into the ground. The entire arena fell silent, stunned, as if the story itself had suddenly been turned upside down. Ji-hoon let a faint smile form, thinking that if things had turned truly dangerous, he would have stepped in, stopped the duel, and exposed Rain as a dragon to flip the entire situation. He never expected, however, that Rain would win by her own strength. The yellow-haired knight lay crumpled near his teammates, his state completely ruined, looking less like a proud noble and more like a failed run cut short. Rain stood frozen, staring at her own hands as the truth sank in. This power was real, and it was hers. Joy surged through her. She turned toward her companions and celebrated her victory with pure excitement. The response she received was just as energetic, praise thrown back at her performance. Ji-hoon congratulated Rain, judging that from now on, she would likely stand as the strongest rabbit beast folk alive. Those words made Rain beam with happiness, and her level climbed to 18. Leon watched quietly and reflected that Rain had barely trained at all, yet she had clearly changed, grown, beyond what he expected. He then looked at Ji-hoon with a small smile, realizing that Ji-hoon's strength had a way of making others stronger as well. Choosing to follow him felt like the right decision. Rain was officially declared the winner of the match. Even then, the yellow-haired knight, still sprawled on the ground, clung to the thought that as long as he was alive, he had not truly lost. That illusion ended instantly. A lizard folk soldier stepped forward and killed him on the spot, declaring his defeat without pause. The sight shattered the female teammate's resolve, and she finally broke down, unable to endure anymore. The instructor then called for the next human fighter to enter the arena. Without delay, the female knight stepped forward. Leon reacted in shock, noticing that she had slipped into the arena in an instant, her movement almost impossible to follow. Ji-hoon thought back. He could not clearly remember the A-rank knight he had faced in the forest, but this woman was different. He remembered her well. She was the yellow current beauty sword, Kalhera. At a glance, she looked ordinary, but beneath that surface, she was anything but. Kalhera formed a twisted smile, having reached her limit after witnessing too much pain that day. She wanted to feel that sensation again. Ji-hoon analyzed her further and identified her nature at once. She was a sadist, someone who drew pleasure from inflicting pain, turning the arena into her personal playground. Kalhera blushed faintly and pointed straight at Ji-hoon, marking him as the leader. Ji-hoon reacted with clear surprise as he realized she was challenging him directly. Rhea watched Kalhera closely and felt uneasy. Something about that woman was wrong, especially the way she stared at Ji-hoon with such a disturbing expression. The fight instructor turned toward Ji-hoon and asked what Kalhera had said. Ji-hoon answered calmly, explaining that Kalhera wanted to fight him. Hearing this, the instructor told Ji-hoon that if he intended to fight, he should step down into the arena himself. Ji-hoon began to think carefully. Kalhera was a knight from the upper tier of A-rank, and on top of that, she was fully armed with specialized A-rank equipment. Even among A-rank knights, she stood on a completely different level. Logically, taking such a risk made little sense. Still, no matter how strong Kalhera was, she could not endure a dragon's breath at that distance. All Ji-hoon needed was to shut down her high-speed movement skill, Current Shift. His tools were simple: his durable body and Risaldrak's single-strike power. If he won, the experience gained would be enormous. The thought crossed his mind whether he should attempt it. Ji-hoon then stated that he always fought together with Risaldrak. Kalhera reacted with interest, seeing this as something that would double the fun. Before moving, Ji-hoon borrowed Belle's sword. Leon warned him that the woman was dangerous. Ji-hoon acknowledged this and walked toward the arena without hesitation. As Ji-hoon moved, Liarch, resting atop his head, glanced at Risaldrak and was pulled back into memories of his childhood. He remembered his mother telling him that their people had once been saved, and that those beings had shared their power with them. She had said that when Liarch grew older, he too would be able to use that power. Back then, the young Liarch had wondered if that was really possible for him. Returning to the present, Liarch dismissed those thoughts as foolish nostalgia. Before the battle started, Ji-hoon raised an important concern. He asked what would happen if spectators among the lizard folk were killed during the fight. Risaldrak answered coldly that the arena was far too large for humans to fight properly and gave the signal to begin. Kalhera looked at Ji-hoon with a faint smile, her thoughts dark and twisted. She weighed whether she should stab him or slice him apart, her imagination drifting in a way that felt closer to a nightmare than a duel. After deciding, she raised her sword forward, satisfied with her choice. Leon watched anxiously and noticed something off about her stance as she gripped the blade, even from that distance. Without warning, Kalhera activated yellow current thunderbolt magic inside her sword and hurled it forward at terrifying speed toward the guards. The guards barely managed to block the attack with their shields. Leon was stunned. Throwing a sword infused with lightning magic was a technique that could end a fight instantly if the opponent did not understand what was happening. Leon assumed Ji-hoon had dodged the attack. Rhea corrected him at once, pointing out that Ji-hoon had not moved at all. Leon was left confused. The view then revealed a thin cut on Ji-hoon's cheek. Kalhera smiled, finding the situation odd. She realized that Ji-hoon had known she would miss and had chosen not to avoid it on purpose. Ji-hoon watched her closely. Kalhera belonged to the 4th Division of the Cancer Knights and served as vice-captain. She was widely known as the Beauty of the Yellow Current. Yet among those who truly understood her nature, she carried a different name: the Seizure Spectator. She specialized in inflicting pain, using a cruel fighting style that dragged death out slowly. She never ended her opponents quickly, a fact known only to a small circle. 80% of those who faced her never survived. There was no way Ji-hoon could have predicted her miss and deliberately stayed still. Kalhara smirked and decided to remove the irritating obstacle first. Jihoon felt a surge of shock at her sudden killing intent. She grinned again, convinced that this reaction proved she was right, and launched another strike. Jihoon barely avoided it, deflecting with his sword. Leon immediately understood how bad the situation was for Jihoon. Jihoon had no ranged weapons and no long-distance magic. Rhea argued that he only needed to dodge and counterattack. Jihoon told Rizal to stay right behind him. Leon pointed out that Jihoon was nowhere near as fast as Rhea. The only way Jihoon could deal damage was through a direct charge. With no hesitation left, Jihoon rushed straight at Kalhara. She welcomed him with a warped smile, eager to savor every expression he would show as he suffered. She formed an electric ring around herself using yellow current lightning. The shock hit Jihoon instantly. Rhea cried out in alarm. The Lizard Folk King watched without any visible reaction. Jihoon groaned as electricity tore through his body. Kalhara laughed openly, enjoying the look on his face as he endured the pain. She wanted to see what expression would come next, pushing him to show her more. Jihoon broke the situation down in his mind. Electric Ring was a skill with heavy magic consumption. Kalhara would likely enjoy it until her opponent was close to collapsing, then stop. But once it ended, the pain afterward would be far worse than what he felt now. Kalhara kept laughing, fascinated, wondering how it felt as his blood vessels were torn apart. She wondered whether the sensation stung him or thrilled him, driven by a need to know what he felt. Jihoon realized that he had already endured the assault for 10 seconds. Kalhara's current level was no higher than 29. That placed her maximum magic power at around 1500. Current Shift consumed 400 MP. Electric Cloud used 100 MP. Electric Ring drained 50 MP per second. If Jihoon could hold out for 11 more seconds, she would lose access to Current Shift entirely. Kalhara grew irritated, disliking the calm look on Jihoon's face. Jihoon remained composed, thinking that pain could only be understood by taking a hit directly. The system window activated, displaying a notice that magic immunity nullified lower-tier magic attacks. Jihoon immediately commanded Roselle to unleash Dragon's Breath. Roselle released the attack straight at Kalhara. She muttered her hatred for pain as the blast hurled her away, smashing her into the ground. The Lizard Folk King witnessed the scene and was struck by a sudden memory. Someone from long ago had once told him that their people had been saved, and that power had been shared with them. It was said that when Liart grew up, he too would be able to wield that power. The moment lingered, heavy with understanding, as the meaning of that forgotten promise began to surface again. Roselle's dragon breath left the surrounding area half destroyed. Every lizard folk stood frozen, unable to move. From a distance, the Lizard Folk King observed the scene with sharp focus. He understood at once that this was power inherited from the Dragonkin. Dragon's Breath was an ability only the rarest lizard folk warriors could achieve, those who had reached the absolute pinnacle. The fact that such power came from such a small being was almost impossible to accept. Leon supported Jihoon's injured body and helped him stand. Jihoon then addressed all the lizard folk, certain that they, more than anyone else, had already felt it. He made it clear that the only one present capable of using Dragon's Breath was Relak himself, their chieftain. All lizard folk revered dragons, and even if they already sensed the truth, he would now make it undeniable who they were meant to serve. The Lizard Folk King asked for the dragon's name. Jihoon answered that it was Roselle Drak. At that instant, Roselle's eyes began to glow. Power surged through his body as he started shifting into a more mature form. Outside the arena, a deep red aura flooded the area with overwhelming energy. An elderly lizard folk, seeing the red light, understood at once that the ancient legend had awakened. The remaining lizard folk, the knights, Rain, and Rhea, were all left completely stunned. Even the Lizard Folk King stood frozen as he witnessed Roselle Drak's true form. Roselle Drak released a thunderous roar, and a system window appeared, announcing that the blood of the dragon had awakened, allowing a mature shift to temporarily take on a full adult body. Jihoon recognized Roselle Drak at once as the boss of the 99th wave, the cold-blooded dragon known as Roselle Drak. The Lizard Folk King dropped to his knees before him, having seen the truth with his own eyes. He accepted Roselle Drak as the legend passed down through scale and blood and acknowledged him as the true dragon. Rylak, chieftain of the lizard folk, swore from that moment forward to serve Roselle Drak as their sovereign. After him, every lizard folk knight also knelt. Leon watched in disbelief, realizing that Jihoon had succeeded in uniting the lizard folk. Jihoon let out a smirk, thinking about the absurd difficulty of the situation, and finally admitted to himself that he had become Leon's equal. Roselle Drac beat his wings and rose into the air. The pressure alone was enough to make Rain collapse. Leon could not even remain standing, understanding that a single flap of those wings carried crushing power. As Roselle Drac climbed higher, his roar echoed across the sky. Jihoon watched with a satisfied smile, convinced that the legend had truly taken form. He decided that this time, he would create a new legend in this world. Then something important crossed Jihoon's mind. Atop Roselle Drac, the boss of the 99th wave, there was a tiny speck, clearly shaped like a person. Not long after, Roselle Drac's power faded, his strength drained, and he shrank back into his small form. Before he could fall, Jihoon caught him. Jihoon praised Roselle for unleashing Dragon's Breath and achieving a mature shift, acknowledging his effort. Roselle felt pleased by the praise. Jihoon noted that the transformation had only been temporary and far too brief. A system window appeared, announcing that the main quest had been completed. Another faction expansion had been cleared, reaching 1,255 out of 1,000, exceeding the requirement by more than 100 and raising the chance of high-tier rewards. Exceeding the target by over 200 further increased those chances. A reward was granted in the form of a random grade stone with the option to claim it immediately or later. A stone emerged from within Roselle. Jihoon recognized it as a grade stone capable of upgrading an A rank into an S rank. Another system message followed, stating that upon reaching level 10, Jihoon's existence was now defined by his accumulated achievements. Confused, Jihoon wondered what that meant. The system clarified that he was now a third kind of being, neither human nor monster. He could hear the screams of the fallen and draw their power into the real world. With that, his new classification was revealed as a soulbinder. His HP and MP values appeared alongside the change. The scene flowed smoothly into celebration. The lizard folk prepared a massive feast. Relok invited everyone to eat freely, treating them as honored guests. Gratitude was shown toward Relok in return. Leon noticed Jihoon eating far more than usual and questioned it. Rain answered that the chief must have been starving, so it only made sense. The sheer amount of meat left everyone stunned, and excitement spread as they rushed toward the food. Leon and the others joined in without hesitation, unable to resist. Before long, everyone finished eating, completely full. After the meal, Jihoon asked where Rizal was. Leon pointed toward the temple. Jihoon looked up and saw the lizard folk fanning Rizal with leaves, feeding him, calling him the Dragon King, and asking if he needed anything. Jihoon was shocked to realize this had been going on the whole time. Leon pointed out that it looked like the lizard folk were following Rizal, not Jihoon. Jihoon laughed it off, treating it lightly, and saying they were simply honored guests, nothing more than visitors. He did not care, as long as someone followed them. He claimed that Rizal was him, and he was Rizal. Leon questioned what that was even supposed to mean. Jihoon brushed it aside, calling it just one of those things, and suggested they rest for the day since tomorrow would be busy. Suddenly, Leon sensed something, and said someone was watching them. Jihoon replied that he could not see anyone. Leon looked at Jihoon's expression and commented that he looked frightening. The scene then shifted to the kingdom. An injured knight stumbled back into the castle, muttering that he had to report what happened. From the castle walls, soldiers noticed him and stared into the distance. The following morning, the castle's residents examined the raft that had carried the bandits driven off by Jihoon. Meanwhile, the group of bandits is escorted by a castle knight. As they complain of thirst, their request for water is denied, with the explanation that their only right at the moment is to wait for the king's decision. The bandit leader then notices a poster bearing Jihoon's face, and it does not take long before the group arrives at the castle. Standing before the king, some of the bandits beg for forgiveness, while the guards order everyone to remain silent and feel ashamed for stealing the king's treasures and begging for mercy. After that, the situation becomes an outright affront. Suddenly, the doors of the hall open again, and the warrior who managed to escape the lizard folk lands enters. The king's advisors ask why Arkor, the warrior's name, has come alone, since he is a subordinate of Rock Hands. Arkor explains that he returned alone because none of the others survived. His entire group was wiped out. The advisor then asks who was responsible, and Arkor explains that he survived only because he was positioned in the rear, and that the one responsible for the attack was the legendary warrior summoned by the king. Alongside a small flying monster, this revelation leaves the king completely stunned. Arkor continues his account, saying that because of injuries to his leg, he had to remain still until the monsters fell asleep. Before leaving, he overheard the plans of the group led by the legendary hero, whose intention was to gather monsters and attack the king's empire. The advisors debate the fact that the legendary warrior is alive, and are confused to learn that he is amassing monsters. Barker is then asked where the legendary warrior is, but he cannot say for certain. He is interrupted by the bandit leader, who claims they are in the Fox Cave. The king asks him to repeat himself, and without hesitation, the man declares that he knows the legendary warrior's hideout. The king immediately orders his advisors to gather all elite knights at the castle. He declares that a punitive force will be formed, led by the elite knights. The subordinates waste no time carrying out the king's orders, much to the bandit leader's delight, as he will finally have revenge for what happened to his brother. Before long, Ares is interrupted from organizing the defenses to receive the royal summons that the king is calling everyone together. Urus also has his training cut short for the meeting, and little by little the message reaches each of the heroes, including Bianca, who hardly appears old enough to be an elite warrior, and who is interrupted while practicing her painting. At last, the message reaches Sir Cancer as well, who seems to be in a private moment, his bath interrupted. He is not shaken by the situation. On the contrary, he expresses excitement at the news that something interesting is finally happening. Back in the lizard folk lands, Leon prepares to depart to meet Mudrak and then return to the group. Before he can leave, Rain shows interest in accompanying him. Jihoon asks why Rain wants to go with Leon, and she explains that the lizard folk lands are too damp and slimy, and that she wants some fresh air. Jihoon is surprised by her reasoning and asks whether Rhea would like to go as well. She promptly refuses, saying she is fine where they are. As the group splits up, Rhea asks whether the clothes Jihoon is wearing are new. The hero explains that he borrowed them, since his own clothes were completely destroyed during the battle, and the lizard folk said they had some human clothes stored away. Rhea remarks that the outfit suits Jihoon well, leaving him embarrassed. As they walk on, the pair is surprised by a guard giving orders to a prisoner. Jihoon asks what is happening, and the guard replies that it is nothing important. Jihoon ignores the incident and continues on, while the guard finds it strange that the hero addressed him by name. Before Jihoon can walk away, however, the prisoner calls out to him, claiming he only needs to use the bathroom. Jihoon sympathizes with the situation and helps the prisoner, taking responsibility for resolving the matter. Before leaving, he even asks the other prisoners whether any of them would like to go as well. They reply that they do not need to.